Hey guys. This is part 13 of What If Naruto Was Azula's Bodyguard. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 36. Bluffing and Speeding. Location: Konoha. Ino stood outside of Naruto's door. Even though she had the key to his apartment, she was a little afraid to use it. Before Naruto came back, his apartment was just a set of rooms they cleaned regularly. They may have reminded them of him, but it was memories of him 3 years ago, when he was hyperactive and had greeted them in a loud voice. Now, he was back but completely different from what they remembered. Instead of being hyperactive, he stayed calm and collected, if not a bit sarcastic, unless something really angered him. If that happened, he would not hesitate to show his anger. Instead of greeting them loudly or excitedly whenever he saw them, he looked at them like he didn't want to be anywhere near them. Perhaps it's a good thing that Sakura and her team are out of the village for 2 months, she thought. If they were here, there would probably be a bloodbath. Naruto, are you awake? She called out, hesitantly knocking on the door. Everyone is gathered downstairs for breakfast. We're waiting on you. There was no reply. Come on, Naruto. Since when have you passed up free food? There's plenty of ramen waiting. The more she knocked, the more she lost the hesitation. When there was still no reply, she started banging on the door. Hey! We're trying to be nice to you and wait. Do you want us to start with you? Still no reply. The door just stood there, mocking her by denying her the answers she wanted. Fine. If you don't want any food, go ahead and starve, she shouted before stomping away. She went downstairs, reaching the common room through the kitchen. They usually didn't eat breakfast or lunch together, that was dinner. But this time, they wanted to eat with an old friend. That was the idea, at least. Is he not coming down? Hinata asked. They, minus Team Kakashi, were all waiting around the table. Ino's anger didn't stop once she sat down. He didn't even open the door. She fumed. Are we going to wait for him or not? Choji asked his teammate. It's not my problem if he doesn't want to come join us. To make her point, she started eating. But we did this for him. Kiba protested. What was the point of it if he didn't come down to eat with them? If he's going to be like this, there's nothing we can do about it, Niji told him. He is correct, Kiba, Shino said, sitting down alongside Niji. If Naruto does not wish to join us, then we can't force him. Why can't we? I don't know about you, but I would rather not get killed trying to force him to have breakfast with us, Shikamaru said. If he doesn't want to eat, he can starve, Tenten agreed. That's what I yelled at him, Ino said. Everyone else began to eat as well. They tried to have a conversation, but they didn't really feel like having one. The whole point of having this breakfast was for Naruto. It seemed he was doing his best to ignore them. They finished the food just as people walked through the front door. Hey guys, Aang greeted them. Sorry if we're late. We had to feed both Appa and Fanning. That, and Momo kept running through the rooms, Katara commented. The lemur perked up at his name. Then he saw the food on the table and made a leap for it. Akela rolled his eyes. Don't worry, you're fine, Kiba assured them. Where's Naruto? Zuko asked, looking around. He didn't see the blonde anywhere nearby. That jerk's probably still asleep, an annoyed Ino said, trying to focus on what she was eating instead of what they were talking about. Is that so? Azula asked with an amused smirk. I'll take care of it. She went up the stairs, disappearing from sight. Toph sat down with a graceless slump as others stood up. Where are you going? She asked. We want to see how she wakes him up, Ino answered. It's best if you don't, Zuko warned them. Not unless you want get caught in the crossfire. Crossfire? Repeated Tenten. He nodded. When Azula tries something, she'll give it her all and then some. But that's not always a good thing. Sometimes it gets her into problems. Like what? Lee asked. From what I can tell, the officers who are in charge of training recruits have begged Naruto many times not to let her train with the recruits, he told them. Apparently when she does, at least 20 people are sent to the hospital. At least? Repeated Kiba. He couldn't believe what he had just heard. And that's on a good day. That stopped them from going up the stairs. They waited for a few minutes, listening for the sounds of fighting or an explosion. What they got was both Azula and Naruto walking down the stairs. Now that's a way to be woken up in the morning, Naruto declared, looking at Azula with a grin. I'm so glad you approve, she remarked. Although she tried to hide it, some of them could see the faint blush on her cheeks. What did you do? Katara asked her, having seen the blush. She kicked the door open, walked in, and woke me up with a kiss, Naruto answered. Are you serious? Sokka asked, surprised that Azula would do something like that. He wasn't the only one. The rest of Team Avatar were surprised too. Why would I lie about something like that? He looked at him, Akela, and Zuko. You guys have eaten, right? Yeah, we have, the tribesman replied. Good, then let's get going. He headed for the door. What about you? Zuko asked. Shouldn't you get something? I had an apple. Come on. The three of them fell in behind him. Ino watched as they left. That was it? They were just going to leave? Hey, hold on! She shouted, stopping them. Naruto turned around. Yes, Ms. Harpy? He asked with a pleasant voice that everyone could tell was faked. What did you call me? She demanded as she stood. You heard me. What do you want? Naruto, Hinata spoke up. Why aren't you wearing the clothes we set out for you or your headband? You're still wearing your prisoner jumpsuit. While it was nice to see him wearing orange, the fact it was prison garb was wrong. That's because I am a prisoner, he answered. Until they leave this place, he was considering himself a prisoner of Konoha. He turned back around and walked out. Zuko, Sokka, and Akela were right behind him. You really consider yourself a prisoner? Zuko asked him as they walked down the street. I just said that, didn't I? Last time I checked, a prisoner couldn't walk around the village freely, the scarred dragon pointed out. Granted, people were trying to avoid them, but the blonde was walking freely. Look at the top of the building on your left. He waited as Zuko looked at the building in question. You see him? Yeah, I see him. There was an ANBU agent looking down and keeping track of them. Sokka, look at the roof 2 buildings down. What am I? The tribesman began to ask, only to stop as he looked. There was an ANBU agent up there. Oh, I see him. Just because I can walk freely, doesn't mean there aren't guards keeping an eye on me, Naruto told them as they turned a corner. If you hate this place so much, why don't you just destroy it? I mean, you could have told the Fire Lord before you've defected to our side to sic the Fire Nation army into this place. The blonde suddenly swung a roundhouse kick at Sokka, who jumped back to avoid it. Whoa! What did I say? He asked. Akela drew his lips back, baring his fangs. So, everyone in this village is deserving of my hatred? Naruto asked in a growl. Does that include the children born after I was? Does it include the newborns that were given life after I had left? Or the kids who are growing up with no knowledge of who I am? How about strangers I have never met? Wait, what are you talking about? Think, Sokka. You're supposed to be the smart one of the group. What did the Konoha 11 tell you about this place when they traveled with you? Just a few general things, like it was a village of shinobi, it was in the Land of Fire, which is considered one of the 5 great shinobi countries. He remembered that conversation quite well. It took them a while to convince him that the Land of Fire was not the Fire Nation. So, you think nothing would happen if I destroyed Konoha? It's the Land of Fire's main source of strength. What would happen if I took away that source? Zuko realized it first. The Land of Fire would crumble and fall. Creating what? A power vacuum, Sokka said, seeing where this was going. And a power vacuum on that scale will lead to war. It could quite possibly be the bloodiest, chaotic and destructive war this side of the planet has ever seen. And you want me to condemn thousands, if not millions of lives to a possible death just because I have no love for one village? And to think that the Earth Kingdom is already subjected to that kind of treatment, now you want to extend the same treatment here? I'm sorry. I didn't think of it like that, the tribesman apologized. Naruto calmed himself down and turned back around. You need to stop being so gung-ho about things, Sokka. Not everyone is guilty for what happened to me. He started walking again, and they followed. Shouldn't we get to the academy? Zuko dared to ask. The Chunin exam starts soon. We're getting there, he answered. Actually, hold on. He stopped and looked at a store. Without saying a word to the others, he turned and walked into the store. Tsunade sat back in her seat, taking a small break from the paperwork. Lady Tsunade, Shizen said as she walked into the room. What is it? The Hokage asked her. Were you really going to erase Naruto's memories? Who told you that? Was it Jiraiya? She asked her assistant, making it sound like she was angry. No, he didn't. I was outside the door yesterday, and I heard you talking about erasing Naruto's memories. Tears began to glisten in her eyes. Why would you do something like that? Don't start crying, Shizen. You're a shinobi. As she said those words, her eyes flickered around the room, checking and double-checking everything. Shizen nodded and wiped the tears off. But why would you do it? It's the best for everyone. You would be keeping him from people he knew for 3 years. She accused her sensei. That's only if he refused to come back, Tsunade replied, keeping her voice even. If he came back of his own accord, I'd allow him to visit them. But his first duty would be to Konoha. You know he has a rank of high standard in the bending countries. People would notice if the paragon of the Fire Nation wasn't around. We'd give him time to train his replacement, and then have him come back. He doesn't belong over there, he never has. It doesn't matter if he belongs there or not. Shizen protested. Don't you want him back as well, Shizen? The Hokage asked her. Of course I do. But why do you have to go to such lengths? Because I want him back, she answered, looking away. You might think badly of me, but it really is the best for everyone. It won't be for Naruto, though. You're just being selfish, her assistant accused her. I know, she admitted. Naruto's team stood before the academy. So, we're supposed to go in there? Zuko asked as he looked the place over. When he didn't get an answer, he looked back. Naruto? Naruto didn't answer him. He just stared at the swing lying still underneath the tree. He sat on the swing, looking at the kids who had just become shinobi and their parents. Everyone looked so happy. The parents wore proud smiles on their faces. There, you see him? He heard one mother say. It's that boy, another mother said. I heard he's the only one who failed. Well, it serves him right. Just what would happen if he became a shinobi? I mean, he's the boy who, SSSHH, we're not allowed to talk about that. Naruto, hey Naruto! Shouted Sokka. He winced at the volume of the tribesman's voice. Ah! Don't do that, I'm not deaf. Well, you were spacing out for a minute. Sorry, I was reliving old memories. He looked back at the swing. The memories had faded away, for now. But he felt like more would show themselves if he wasn't careful. Do you want to talk about it? Not right now and not with you guys. Let's just get this thing started. He turned around and walked into the academy. Zuko, Sokka, and Akela followed him. They walked through the hallway to reach the stairs. Why would you put the stairs at the end of the hall? Zuko asked aloud as they went up to the next floor. Wouldn't it be better to put them next to the entrance? A little walking never hurt anybody, Naruto told him. Except maybe for Aang, he would complain the entire time. They all thought about it and silently agreed on that fact. Aang would complain. He would complain loudly. They went into the second-floor hallway and saw people gathered around a door. The sign above the door said 301. Hang on, that can't be right, Zuko said quietly. Aren't we on the second floor? Sokka looked at the door number with a puzzled expression. Naruto knew it wouldn't take them long to figure it out. Don't say anything, Zuko, he ordered. The same goes for you, Sokka. We just keep on walking. They made their way through the small crowd and then continued down the hallway. The genin they left behind sniggered and called them losers and idiots. We're the idiots? Sokka asked once they were out of sight. They're the ones who think it's the third floor. Akela nodded in agreement. You guys don't really know what genjutsu can do to you. Those genin do, so the genjutsu caught them in its trap, the blonde explained as they climbed the stairs to the third floor. Hey you! Shouted a voice from below. They looked down and saw another genin standing on the floor below. Judging from his headband, he was from Konoha. The blonde one, I'm talking to you! He shouted up at them. Naruto looked down at him. What do you want? He asked, sounding bored. You're Naruto Uzumaki, right? What about it? I want you to fight me, the genin demanded. Naruto was silent for about a minute as he stared at the kid. Finally, he turned away and kept on walking, the other three following him. Hey, don't ignore me! The kid screamed. They did just that and kept on walking, only to stop when the kid jumped up to their level, landing in front of them. Naruto stopped, but he barely considered the kid. "Get out of the way," he ordered. "Not until you fight me. I've heard stories about you and I want to see if you live up to them." No one said anything as Naruto slowly looked him over. "What's the matter? You scared?" the kid taunted. "I'd be surprised if you weren't. I was the rookie of the year in my class. They said I was the best prodigy that Konoha had since Sasuke Uchiha." Again, no one said anything. Sokka heard noise below. He looked and saw his teammates had arrived and were cheering him on. Apparently that was all he needed. "If you're not going to fight, I'll make you fight." He charged forward and threw a punch at Naruto. Much to his surprise, it was effortlessly caught. For the record, Naruto told the kid, holding the fist in a tight grip, "I was trying to decide whether I should just break your arm or cut it off. Lucky for you, I decided the lesser of two evils." He broke the kid's arm with ease, making him howl in pain. Then he punched him in the solar plexus, cutting off the howl. After that, he tossed the kid over the side, sending him crashing down in front of his teammates. As the kid's teammates tried to get him back up, trying to figure out what just happened, Team Avatar left them behind. "Wasn't that a little harsh?" Sokka asked Naruto. "No," he answered. "If anything, that was a kindness. That kid was fresh out of the academy. He thought he was hot stuff and good enough to take the Chunin exam so soon after graduating. If he and his teammates kept up that attitude, they would have been dead within 5 minutes." "But didn't you do the same thing?" Zuko asked him. "Like I said, we got through by sheer dumb luck." They stopped in front of a door at the end of the hallway. This was the right 301. "You guys ready?" Akela and Zuko nodded. "Let's go show them who we are," Sokka declared. "Couldn't have said better myself," he said with a grin, kicking the door open. The slam was loud, getting everyone's attention. Once they knew what caused the sound, they focused on the newcomers. "There are a lot of people here," Sokka thought as they walked in. He probably had spoken a little too soon. "Will we have to fight them all right here and now?" Zuko asked himself. "We might not last, let alone win." Naruto didn't say anything. He just led them to the side and leaned against the wall. Zuko did the same while Sokka sat down on the floor with Akela. The entire room was silent as everyone there stared at them. They had all heard about Naruto Uzumaki and the things he did in the elemental countries. They had heard about the battle in the Land of Waves, which got a bridge named after him. The last Chunin exams he partook in, which ended with the invasion from Oto and Suna and him beating the current Kazekage. The mission he took with Jiraiya, the Toad Sage, to bring the Slug Princess, Tsunade, back to the village so she could be Hokage. And of course, they had heard of the mission to retrieve Sasuke Uchiha and the almost legendary fight the two of them had. But after that, all they heard was that he had escaped from the village and had disappeared for 3 years. And now, he was back. When he felt the stares, Naruto looked up and stared right back at them. "You people got something to say?" he asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Or are you all just that bored?" 3 people walked out of the crowd and over to them. The person in the middle had white hair and purple eyes. He wore a purple shirt and gray pants. He wore a belt around his waist that held a bottle of water. Another belt was around his chest, and strapped to the back of it was a sword that both Sokka and Naruto knew well enough, though they didn't let anything show on their faces. Between the 2 belts was a headband showing that he was from Kusugakure, the village hidden in the grass. The girl on his left wore glasses. She also had red hair and red eyes. Her hair was particularly odd. On the right side, it was short and unkempt, while on the left, it was long and straight. She wore a lavender-colored shirt with long sleeves but exposed her navel. She wore short black shorts and black stockings going all the way up her legs. She wore her headband around her forehead. The man on his right was tall. He had orange hair and orange-red eyes. His face was one of calmness. They couldn't see his shirt or his pants, due to the fact they were covered by a cloak. His headband hung around his neck. "Well, look who we have here," the white-haired one spoke with a grin, showing the pointed teeth he had. "Naruto Uzumaki, in the flesh, it is an honor." He gave a mocking half-bow. "Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Su-Jetsu Hozuki. These are my teammates, Karen and Yugo." Naruto didn't say anything, either did Zuko or Sokka. "So, where have you been for the past 3 years?" Again, he didn't say anything. Oh, so you've become one of those tough silent people, right? The grin he wore became bloodthirsty. Just so you know, you're dead when we meet in combat. I've heard stories about you, and I want to see if you live to the reputation. Or are you too scared? Lay off him, you idiot, Karen told her teammate. Naruto still didn't say anything. He reached into the prison uniform's back pocket and pulled out the pack of cigarettes he had bought from the store. He took one, put it in his mouth and put the rest back. He then dug around in his right pocket before pulling out the Zippo lighter he had bought with the cigarettes. Flicking the lid open, he lit the cigarette and took a drag. As he put the lighter away, he took the cigarette out and blew smoke in Su-Jetsu's face, making him step back and cough. So, you thought you could make yourself sound and look tough by threatening me, is that it? He asked. Congratulations, you've succeeded in making yourself a braggart. They're the ones who usually go first. That's it. You're dead, Uzumaki. Su-Jetsu snarled. He was about to leap for him, but Karen held him back. The other teams began to whisper among themselves as this went on. Calm down, idiot. We can't start a fight, she told him. Naruto, Zuko and Sokka just watched this go on for a couple of minutes. So, how is your master? Naruto finally asked as Su-Jetsu calmed down. Is he here? Master, what are you talking about? Yugo asked, finally speaking. Do you not understand? Alright, I'll ask you again. How is Orochimaru doing and is he here? The entire room went silent when they heard that. What the hell? How is Orochimaru our master? We're from Kusa, you idiot! Karen all but yelled at him. Besides, why would Orochimaru come here again? He'd be attacked on the spot the minute he stepped through the gate. So he's not here. That's a pity. He took another drag and blew smoke in the air. I was hoping to gut the bastard myself. Ha! Who's talking tough now? Su-Jetsu asked with a laugh. Besides, what makes you think that we serve Orochimaru? The Kubikurabocho is strapped to your back. I know only two kinds of shinobi who take it from someone's grave. One kind has the right. The other's master just wants more power. The first would be shinobi from Kiri and the other is from Oto. And since you're not from Kiri, you're probably from Oto, the blonde explained in a level tone of voice. Guess what, pal? You're wrong. We're from Kusa. You can tell by our headbands, he sneered, jabbing at his headband. Of course you are, he replied with condescending sarcasm as he took another drag. Well, where are your headbands? I thought you'd be a Konoha shinobi if you were here. But I don't see a headband. He gave a cold smile. Look down at my feet, you'll see it, he told the so-called Kusa shinobi. He did and Naruto kicked him hard underneath the chin. He flew back and his head burst into water. Everyone stared in shock at the body on the floor. The shock turned to surprise when water started to flow back to the body and formed Su-Jetsu's head. That's a hell of a kick you've got there, he said as he stood back up, ready to start a fight. Kit, look at his teammate, the QB warned his host. He turned and looked at Yugo, who was muttering to himself and beginning to wear a crazed grin. Murderous intent began to roll from him. I'll kill him. I'll kill him, he chanted within his mind as the skin around his neck began to turn dark. But before he could even do anything or before his teammates could stop him, he felt an immense amount of killing intent directed at him. It was coming from Naruto and it showed him several different versions of him dying. Some of them were excessive, some of them were extensive, some of them were gory, and all of them were painful. If you want to live, I'd recommend you curb your lust for killing people, the blonde told him. His murderous side had never disappeared so quickly. He was left standing in fear of the blonde, who had turned his gaze and his killing intent on the rest of the people there. You all probably think that you're good enough to take these exams, and you also think you'll be able to pass and become a chunin. But I've got one question for you all. He took a drag. How many of you tenderfoot pussies have been in a war? How many of you have watched people you've known get killed right before your eye? How many have you tried to save, only to fail and watch their lives leave their eyes? How many people here have come to within an inch of dying multiple times, only to be saved by some sort of luck? As he asked these questions, he slowly made the killing intent bigger. The others there began to hallucinate. They saw what he described and began to get more and more scared. Akela had pulled his nose away in disgust once he had smelt the amount of pants being soiled. You're trying to become a chunin, which means you're going to get missions like that, where people will die, and it might be your fault. If you're able to take that, then please stay. For those of you who can't. The killing intent, which had many genin there almost turned into blubbering babies wanting their mommy, disappeared. The door is right there. He pointed at said door. Get out. The rush to get out of the room could almost be classified as a stampede. Genin ran over others trying to get out of the room. They fled from the person who seemed to indirectly promise them a very painful and very bloody death should he find them. By the time they had fled, less than half remained in the room. The remaining genin weren't terrified of Naruto, it was more like disturbed. Both Zuko and Sokka looked at Naruto with a new level of respect. If he could do something like that to an entire room full of shinobi, it was no wonder he was able to take control of Ba Sing Se away from Long Foam. Thought so, Naruto thought to himself. That was too easy. But fun, the QB said. Oh yeah, it was definitely fun. Damn, he is good, Su-Jetsu admitted as he watched all of this happen. His amazement soon turned to eager anticipation. I can't wait to fight him. What was up with that chakra? Karen wondered, looking at Naruto with a small amount of fear in her eyes. What was he doing for the past 3 years that enabled him to something like that? A huge cloud of smoke burst into existence, getting everyone's attention. Once the cloud dispersed, Ibiki Marino along Inoichi Yamanaka stood in front of a group of chunins. Listen up! Ibiki roared. My name is Ibiki Marino and this is Inoichi Yamanaka. We are the proctors for the first exam and now, we are your worst enemies. Hold on, Inoichi said, looking at the genin. This is less than half of the genin who signed up for the exams. Where are the rest of them? All the genin there looked over at Team Avatar, more specifically, at Naruto, who was currently taking a drag and blowing smoke. He finally noticed the stares. What? He asked, taking the cigarette out of his mouth. Naruto, what did you do? Ino's father asked him. He shrugged. Nothing much. They wanted to know if the stories they heard about me were true, so I told them a few things. Next thing you know, most of them are trying to get out of the room. Put that out, Ibiki ordered him, pointing at the cigarette in his mouth. He took it out, dropped it and snuffed it out with his foot. There, you happy now? Ecstatic, he answered before turning his attention to the rest of the genin there. If we are all ready, all of you hand in your paperwork. Once you hand in the paperwork, you will be given a number. He held a small piece of paper up that the number 1 on it. The number you receive will determine where you will sit. Once you are all seated, we will begin the written exam. They all handed in the application form they had been given and had signed. They were told to sit in particular seats. Team Avatar sat very far apart from each other, but that didn't make them nervous. They remembered the talk they had the previous night. Flashback, alright, the first exam we're going to have will be a written exam, Naruto told the other 3 from where he sat. We'll be graded as a team, but they'll keep us separated. Why would they do that? Sokka asked. The questions on the exam will be incredibly difficult. Odds are that I probably won't be able to answer them right off the bat. But that's okay because we're not going to answer them. Wait, you lost me, Zuko admitted. The whole point of this exam is to see how well you can gather information. There will be chunin mingled into the genin there to provide the answers. Other chunin will be seating on the sides and will be keeping an eye on us. If they see us cheating, they'll mark us. If they marked one of us 5 times, we'll fail and get kicked out. So, we would have to cheat in such a way that they won't be able to catch us, Sokka summarized. That would be right, if we were going to actually take the test. But as I said before, we're not going to do that. This is what we're going to do. End flashback. Naruto looked behind. They had placed Sokka in the back on the far right and Zuko on the far left. He was up in the first couple of rows. I guess they think we have some sort of silent communication, he thought. Can you say overly paranoid? The QB asked. Gleefully. Remember, you only have an hour to complete this exam, and Noichi reminded all of them. The 10th question will be given in the last 15 minutes. He looked at the clock. When it struck the top of the hour, he told them to begin. Some of the genin managed to figure out what the purpose of the test was right away and began to cheat. Others took a little longer to understand. They tried to keep calm under the gaze of the chunins watching over them, trying not to think if they were the ones who were marked every time they wrote on the clipboard they held. The hour dragged on, the ticking of the clock unnerving a few of them. While the chunin watched all the genin, both Ibiki and Inoichi were watching Naruto and his teammates. While they did occasionally write something down on the papers in front of them, they just sat in silence, waiting for the time to go out. Out of nowhere, one of the Chunin threw a kunai at the genin next to Naruto. It struck his paper, tearing a hole in it. "What the?" the genin said in surprise, shaking from the fright. "What was that all about?" he asked the Chunin. "We caught you cheating 5 times, he answered. "You failed the test." "What? No way. There's gotta be a mistake. How would you know if I—" "Oh, just shut up," Naruto spoke, surprising everyone. "The guy said you failed? If that was what he said, then you and teammates get your sorry asses out of here." He reached over and pulled the kunai out of the table. "You don't mind if I use this, do you?" he asked the Chunin. When he didn't receive an answer, he started to pick at his nails with it. "Candidate number 15, fail," the Chunin announced as he walked over and took the kunai from Naruto. "Number 86 and 54, fail." The 3 genin stood up and walked out of the room. Once that team was gone, it sent the ball rolling. Every couple of minutes, another team would be failed and sent out of the room. Some would protest, which would result in them getting slammed into the walls by one of the Chunin, or just being dragged out of the room. And all the while, the clock kept on ticking. "You know, I can see why they don't use a digital clock," Naruto mused. "It helps with the mind games." "Funny. I always thought it was there to annoy the hell of the genin," the QB replied. "It's the same basic principle." Finally, after what felt like a millennium to some, 45 minutes had passed. "Very well," Inoichi said, getting everyone's attention. "We will now give you the 10th and final question. But first," Ibiki continued, "there are a few more rules we need to tell you." While he explained the rules, Team Avatar remembered last night. Flashback. When it comes time for the last question, the proctor will hit us along with the rest of the genin with a mind game, Naruto told them. He'll give 2 options. The first is to skip the 10th question. If one genin does choose to skip the question, both he and the rest of his team fail and will be sent out of the room. "Seems like the lesser of 2 evils, going everything you've said so far about the first exam," Zuko noted. "It is. The second choice is to stay and take the question. If you answer the question incorrectly, you and your team will fail as well as be barred from taking the Chunin exams ever again. So, you either take the safe route or take a risk and possibly fail permanently, huh?" Sokka asked for clarification. "That's the gist of it. But all we have to do is very simple." End flashback. Now that we have explained the rules, those of you who wish not to take the question, raise your hand, Inoichi ordered. "Your number will be recorded and then you'll be able to leave." Everyone was silent. Except for the 3 boys, all of them were completely and utterly nervous. No one was sure who would raise their hand first, they just knew who did would start the others off. "I give up," a genin in the back stood up and raised his hand. "Sorry guys, I just can't do it." "Number 128, fail," one of the Chunin announced. "Number 34, number 81, you fail too." The 3 genin left the room. Sure enough, that started the dominoes. Other genin stood up and chose to skip the question. They and their teammates left the room. Some were glaring the one who gave up to death. "Are you not going to say anything, Naruto?" Ibiki asked the blonde with a smirk, remembering what he did in his last exam. "Why should I?" he asked back. "It's a sink or swim world out there. Some of the people decided to sink while others decided to swim." He fell silent after those words while other genin gave up. By the time the last team left, less than a third of the people who took the test were left. There are only 24 left, Inoichi thought to himself. This was biggest amount of genin who had signed up for the Chunin exams. If Naruto hadn't said anything, no doubt this would be larger. Now that all those who had given up have now left, there is only one thing left to say, Ibiki said. "All of you have passed the first exam." The silence in the room was almost deafening. "Wait, what?" Karen shouted, standing up. "What the hell do you mean we passed? What is the 10th question?" "There was no 10th question," Inoichi told her. "Not a written one. Your decision to stay was the answer we needed." As both he and Ibiki explained what the exam was all about, and what was supposed to happen during it, both Zuko and Sokka shared the same thought. "Can we move on, please?" "Finally, it's over," Naruto thought as he stretched in his seat. "Still don't like written exams, huh?" the QB asked with a chuckle. "Of course, I'm just glad I only have to deal with reports nowadays." "You mean you used to only have to deal with reports? Besides, you didn't write anything on the paper." "You mean anything they wanted to see?" For those of you who have answered the last question successfully, you have earned the right to move on to the next exam, Ibiki declared. As the first exam is now officially done, there is nothing left but to wish you all good luck. And in 3, 2, 1, the fox counted down. A black ball smashed through the window. As it flew through the room, it began to unfurl. 2 kunai were thrown at the ceiling which held the thing up. It revealed itself to be a banner, along with a woman. Her hair was black with a blue tint to it, which she had done up in a short, spiky ponytail. Her eyes were purple and pupilless. She wore a mesh suit that went from her thighs to her neck and was also form-fitting. She wore an orange miniskirt and a tan overcoat along with the mesh suit. She wore a pendant around her neck, shin guards, and her headband was worn around her forehead. But before she could say anything, Naruto spoke first. Ladies and gentlemen, he began in a loud voice. Allow me to introduce our proctor for the second exam. She is a woman who can kick your ass 6 ways to Sunday and back using nothing but a dango stick and a smile. I give you the one, the only, Anko Mitarashi. Anko couldn't say anything. She had been caught off guard. Damn it, that was better than what I was planning to say. She thought to herself. It was the only thing she could think. Anko, you're early, Inoichi told her as he stepped out from behind the banner. Again, Ibiki stated as he followed Inoichi. Sorry, I got excited, she told them. But never mind me, you two did a fairly impressive job. Only 8 teams left. And this was the biggest amount of genin we've ever had for the Chunin exams. This wasn't all of us. Before we got here, half had left, Ino's father told her. What? How did that happen? Did they chicken out? In a sense. She followed his gaze and saw Naruto sitting in his seat with indifference. Hello, crazy snake lady, he said to her. Are you going to molest me again? I don't know, she replied, sounding like what he had said didn't embarrass her. Are you going to act tough again? I don't need to act now, he replied, completely confident. Oh? Are you sure about that? Of course I am. And I'd become a bit of a mind reader very recently. I can tell you what all the genin here are thinking right now. And what is that? He wore a fox-like grin on his face. They're thinking, is she wearing a bra underneath that or not? The genin all looked at him in surprise. That was what they were thinking. The boys were thinking it with hormones and lust mixed in. The girls were thinking it with equal parts shock, curiosity, and disgust. Zuko and Sokka simply thought the question with curiosity. They had girlfriends. If they had used any other kind of emotions in the thought process, the ladies would somehow find out. Akela really didn't see what the fuss was about. If Anko wasn't blushing before, she was now. Anyway, if you maggots want to get to the second exam, follow me. She hurriedly strode out of the room, partly to get the second exam started and partly to avoid being caught off guard like that again. All the genin got up and followed her, the last being Team Avatar, who just sauntered out of the room. After 5 minutes of silence, Ibiki looked over at a pair of Chunin. Cut that down, would you? He told them, jerking his thumb at the banner. As they did that, he turned to Inoichi. Might as well start collecting the papers. They started at opposite ends of the room and worked their way through the rows. Inoichi reached for Naruto's paper, picked it up and saw that none of the questions were answered. That's odd, he thought. I saw him write on the paper. Deciding to check the back, he flipped it over. His eyes widened as he looked over what was there. Ibiki, you need to read this, he said. When he noticed that Ibiki was looking at 2 different papers, he hurried over. What's the matter? These are the papers for Naruto's teammates, Ibiki said. There's nothing on them, he noted, looking at the blank papers. What they wrote is on the back. He flipped them over. On the back of each paper was writing. It seemed that Sokka and Zuko had taken their sections of the room and had carefully written down how each person in their sections was cheating. There were also numbers, who was whose teammate and whether they were helping each other. For every genin that had been failed, their number and descriptions were crossed out. I can't help but be impressed. They managed to write all of that without us noticing. I think you should take a look at Naruto's paper. He handed Ibiki said paper and he looked at it. On the back were the numbers for each candidate. But instead of knowing how they were cheating, the paper described the best way to kill them. It also took note of the Chunin as well as him and Inoichi, but it was for incapacitating, not killing. What chilled them to the bone was what was written at the bottom. Estimated duration of bloodbath once Chunin and Proctors are incapacitated, 10 to 15 minutes, depending on reactions and capability to defend oneself. This was written by the kid who didn't answer a single question the last time he took the exam? Ibiki asked in disbelief. There's more. Inoichi told him, pointing at the very bottom of the paper. He looked at where he was pointing to and read what was there. P.S. Of course, I wasn't going to kill them. I just wrote this out of sheer boredom. Do you think we should show these to the Hokage? It's probably for the best, even though they'll be destroyed once she sees them, Inoichi told him. Why would she do that? He had never heard of an exam paper, failed, or passed, being destroyed once the Hokage had finished reading it. Sorry, Ibiki, but that's classified. Only the Hokage and a select few know. And you're one of those few? Yes. He looked around to make sure the Chunin weren't paying attention, obviously or subtly. How serious is this? He whispered. If we fail, the village might be destroyed. What exactly is this place? Su-Jetsu asked as he looked past the fence. All he could see was a large forest. Welcome, boys and girls, to training ground number 44, also known as the Forest of Death, Anko said in a cheery voice. You know, Sokka said as he looked at the forest, I was honestly expecting something a little more original. You can't get everything you want, Sokka, Kurenai, who was the other proctor for the second exam, told him. Hey, I'm not complaining, he told her, also noticing that her pregnancy was much more obvious now. So tell me, Anko, how's the love life? Naruto asked her. Why would you want to know? She asked back. Well, I figured that you really didn't have one, considering the way you were molesting me last time, he remarked casually. She huffed. For your information, I happen to be seeing someone. She's not kidding, is she? He asked Kurenai. No, she's not. Is it seeing someone, or stalking someone? Honestly? There are days when we're not sure. Who's the guy? Your old instructor, Iraka Umino. Dumbstruck, he looked at Anko, then back at Kurenai, back to Anko, and then back to Kurenai. I don't know whether I should be happy for him or pity him, he finally said. Hey! What's that supposed to mean? Anko demanded. You heard me. Anyway, Kurenai said loudly to the rest, stopping them from going any further. Before we begin, we have something to hand out to you. Anko pulled out a small stack of papers from inside her overcoat. Before the exam begins, we will need you to read over and sign this consent form. Some of you will probably not make it out alive. We need your consent to that risk. Otherwise, it'll be on us, she told them all. That made everyone start whispering amongst themselves. Naruto, Sokka, and Zuko didn't. They just remembered the conclusion of last night's conversation. Flashback. The second exam will be a survival exam, Naruto told them. They'll have us do the exam in the Forest of Death. In the center of the forest is a tower, which will be the goal. How do you know all of this, Naruto? Zuko asked him. You're describing what the proctors of each exam will do to us. You also know how each exam works. How can you know this stuff when you haven't been here for 3 years and spent the majority of the first day back in a jail, or with someone else? It depends on the person. Anyway, how I got the information is not important right now, he replied, waving it off. What is important is what's going to happen. So, what's going to happen? Sokka asked. They'll make each of us sign a paper that says if we die in the forest, it's not their fault. Once we hand in those papers, we will be given either an earth scroll, or a heaven scroll. As soon as we walk into that forest, we will have to hunt down any teams that have the second scroll we need while also protecting our own. I take it the scrolls are what we need to get into the tower? Zuko asked. Correct. We'll also be given 5 days to get another scroll and get to the tower. So, we will have 5 days to get a scroll and find the tower, is that it? The only answer he got was a grin. And flashback, they had turned in the consent form and got an earth scroll in return. They were then led to one of the gates surrounding the forest. As the time for the exam to begin got closer, the Chunin with them opened the gate. They kept checking the watches on their arms, and when it was the top of the hour, they opened up the gate. The Kusa team charged into the forest at top speed. They had lost sight of their entrance within minutes. So, who should we target first? Yugo asked. Who cares about that? I want to find Uzumaki, Su-Jetsu said with an evil grin. Ugh, we're in the middle of an exam, idiot, Karen told him with annoyance. I know we have orders, but we don't have time for you to get your kicks. Shut up, woman! He shouted at the redhead. Uzumaki is the strongest person in these exams. I can almost hear Kubikiribocho calling for his blood. Are you sure it's not yourself that's calling for his blood? Yugo asked him. You'll want to talk, Yugo. We both saw what you were going to do before those proctors showed up. I'm not denying that didn't happen. It's because of that I believe we should not go after Naruto Uzumaki right now. What about our orders? Lord Orochimaru's information on him was limited and outdated. We knew that going into this. Yeah, but that's why Lord Orochimaru sent you with us, Karen pointed out. He knew that you might be able to level the playing field against him. And looked what happened to me when I almost lost control. He gave me one look and I was scared. No, scared is too gentle of a word. I was terrified of him. The others just looked at him. They had never thought that Yugo of all people would be terrified of someone when he got like that. It would be for the best if we waited and observed him and his team before following our orders. Fine, Su-Jetsu muttered. Then let's go find a heaven scroll. Team Avatar walked into the forest, completely calm. Once they were out of sight of the gate, they stopped. Akela kept watch. So, did it work? Zuko asked Naruto. Of course it worked, he answered with a grin, pulling a heaven scroll. They had an abundance of them due to the fact they expected more genin. I made the clone beforehand. He snuck in and took the scroll. But how did he know which scroll to take? They had a list, he answered shortly, putting the scroll back. Anyway, now we need to get to the tower. So what, we just walk in a straight line? Sokka asked. He looked around, trying to see where to go from there. But all he could see was a lot of huge trees. If he hadn't been to the foggy swamp, he would have been impressed by the size of the trees. It's that, or we can climb to the top of the trees. Once up there, I make more clones and then make them throw us at the tower. They can do that? The tribesman asked, surprised by that little piece of information. If you want them to. Let's just stick to walking. It never hurt anyone, right? If that's the case, we won't be walking. He looked in the general direction of the tower. It's about 6 miles or so to the tower. We want to get this over with quickly. We run. He looked back at them. Are there any complaints? Are you actually going to listen to them if we tell you we have them? Zuko asked him. Probably not. Then why bother? Relax, it's only 6 miles. Also, I know where I'm going. He took off and they followed. They ran for 6 miles at a dead run. By the time they had reached the tower, Naruto was lightly sweating. There, you see? It wasn't that bad. Sokka, on the other hand, was panting heavily. I think riding Appa made me a bit lazy, he admitted. Akela rolled his eyes at that. Zuko was a little better, but not by much. Well, are we here? Naruto looked at the door. Yeah, we're here. And we lucked out too. This is the door we're supposed to go through as well. He grabbed hold of the door handles and opened it. Come on, guys, he said as he walked through the door. After a moment of getting their breath back, they followed. What they saw was a big room. At the end of room was a board with a poem written on it. But they didn't pay attention to it. They were paying more attention to the guy waiting for them. Jiraiya, Naruto greeted shortly. Naruto, he said. He walked towards them a bit, stopping a few feet in front of them. I take it you have the scrolls. They're right here. The blonde pulled out the scrolls and tossed them at him. Congratulations, he said as he grabbed the scrolls out of the air. You passed the second exam in 45 minutes. You've beaten the old record by 52 minutes. Yay, Naruto said flatly. So, what happens now? Zuko asked the old shinobi. Well, normally I'd explain what the poem behind is supposed to mean, but Naruto already knows it, and you too. Akela growled slightly. Sorry, you three aren't shinobi. There's also the part where Tsunade tells you the true purpose about the exams before letting you off for a month so you can train for the third exam. A month? Repeated Sokka, thinking of the comet. We're going to cut it that close. It looks that way, Naruto told him before looking back at Jiraiya. So we're gonna have to wait 5 days before listening to the spiel? No. You're going to get right to the training. And who's going to train us? Me. He groaned. Oh great, our training will be frequently interrupted by peeping time. Believe me, Gaki, Jiraiya said with a completely serious face. There will be no peeping with anyone on anybody during this training session. He dropped the scrolls to the ground and walked past them. Follow me. The rest of Team Avatar spent the day with the Konoha 11 in the apartment building. So how long are these exams supposed to be? Katara asked as they sat in the living room. Well, the first exam is only an hour, Ino explained. But the second exam could last up to 5 days, Kiba continued. And the third exam is a month later, Niji finished. We're going to be here for a month? Aang repeated. We don't have the time for that. I'm sorry, Hinata said apologetically. But that's the way it is. Let's just hope that Sokka and the others made it through the first exam, the air nomad said, making it sound like a prayer. They'll be fine, Choji assured him. Yeah, if anything, Naruto's luck will get them through, Kiba said with a laugh. Katara, Aang, and Toph shared a confused look. How will Naruto's luck make them succeed? Katara asked. Naruto's luck is almost legendary around here, Tenten explained. He once won the jackpot in a casino with a coin he found on the ground. That would explain why he never went to a gambling hall, Azula mused to herself. You know of Naruto's most youthful luck? Lee asked her with a curious look in his eyes. Once he decided to stay, he would often play gambling games with people, she replied. After a while, they stopped playing for money with him. Every time they did, he would always manage to win. He was also good at knowing who was scamming and who was cheating. They heard a chuckle come from the doorway. That Gaki's got the luck of the gods. Wish I had that. They all turned around to see who it was. The Konoha 11 all stood up when they did. Lady Tsunade, what are you doing here? Ino asked. Team Avatar looked at the Hokage. She was a tall woman with blonde hair and 2 loose ponytails that reached the back of her waist, and brown eyes. On her forehead was a small purple diamond mark. She wore a green jacket over a gray blouse. The blouse was held closed by a dark bluish-gray obi that was the same color of her pants. But what got the attention of Katara, Azula, and surprisingly Toph, was what the blouse held. She had the largest bust they had ever seen. When they saw them, they couldn't help but feel a little jealous. I'm here to pass on some news, she told them. Is it about Naruto and his team? Hinata asked her. Yes. How troublesome, Shikamaru muttered. Did they fail already? No, quite the opposite, they have passed both the first and the second exam already. How can that be? Shino asked. The first exam only lasted an hour, but how could they finish the second exam on the first day? Hey, you're forgetting that we finished on the first day too, Shino. Kiba told him. Only the Sand siblings beat us there. And that is something interesting, Tsunade said, getting their attention once more. Naruto's team beat the Sand siblings' record. How much did they beat it by? Niji asked. 52 minutes. That stunned everyone. They finished the second exam in 45 minutes? How? Asked Ino. Are you a proctor for the Chunin exams, Ino? The Hokage asked her with a pointed tone. No. Then I can't tell you. Can't or won't? Shikamaru asked. She ignored him, and he didn't push it. Where are Naruto and the others now? Azula asked Tsunade. They will be spending the month training. You won't be able to see them for the duration of that time, she answered. Is this part of the whole exam thing? Toph asked. No, this is because their trainer will require nothing but their complete and undivided attention. Who will be training them? Katara asked. Jiraiya. Well, that can't be too bad. I'm sure that Jiraiya will be fair to them, the waterbender remarked. Tsunade snorted in derision. Kid, you don't know him. What do you mean, Lady Tsunade? Hinata asked. Jiraiya has only trained one genin squad, and it's not because he's picky. They were the only genin squad able to survive his training, she told them. I tried it once and I never want to do it again. I don't think I could survive another round of it. Is Lord Jiraiya that bad? Choji asked. The Hokage saying that even she would survive the training was either a cause for awe or worry. When he's serious about the training, he will demand nothing but perfection. He is a sadist when it comes to that. She left them at that. Aang, Azula, Toph and Katara all shared the same thought. What kind of torture are they going to go through? Chapter 37, Practicing and Wondering. Location, Konoha. Azula walked down into the lobby of the hotel. Thank Agni for similar-looking foods, she thought. The food for breakfast still looked a little odd to her, but she managed to make her way through it without causing emergency runs to the bathroom. Azula, over here! Called out Toph from where she was standing with Aang and the others. Good morning, everyone, she greeted as she walked over. Morning, Azula, Aang chirped. He was chipper than ever. She looked at the rest of the group. Do we have any idea of what to do today? When she talked to them, it was a little easier to ignore the Avatar's happy attitude. Not really, Katara answered. We'll have to find a way to pass the time for a month. And we can't go see the guys in that entire time, Toph noted. So we're on our own. Has Fawning been fed? Azula asked. The cooks took care of him and Appa, Suki told her. I kept an eye on them. It was almost funny to watch. They were more afraid of getting close to the dragon than the sky bison. The dragon does look more intimidating. Yeah, but they know what a dragon looks like. They have no idea what a sky bison looks like or what it eats, the Kyoshi warrior said with a smirk. I think the fact that they had to give hay to Appa tipped them off, she replied in complete deadpan. You know what I think we should do? Toph said aloud, getting everyone's attention. What? Katara asked. I think we should train Twinkle Toes while we're here. What? You mean right now? Well, we would have to find a more suitable spot. She does have a point, Azula agreed. Just because we're here for a month, does not mean we should slack off. Okay, so where should we train? Aang asked. We'd have to find a place, Aang, Suki pointed out. They couldn't do it in the middle of the village. She had a feeling the shinobi wouldn't like it. We can go looking once Appa's done eating. No, Azula declared, seeing what he was trying to do. We don't need Appa, we'll walk. His expression was funny, especially with the way his eyes widened. What? Why? He didn't see anything wrong with using Appa. Aang, we're in a village, Katara pointed out. We really don't need to fly around. We didn't do that when we first got here. Oh, right. His grin was sheepish. I forgot. One would think that you were raised by a sky bison the way you keep using Appa, Azula remarked. He said nothing as they left the hotel. You are a fucking sadist. Naruto accused Jiraiya as he, Sokka, and Zuko lay on the ground, wheezing for their existence. Akela was doing the same, just with a little more dignity. That's because your attempts were disgraceful. He all but bellowed at them. You expect us to climb a waterfall, with a load of rocks on our backs, while dodging kunai and shuriken? Sokka demanded. He had felt he was going to fall off at any moment, and had a few times. Yes, I do. And if the three of you do not get up right now, I will double your loads. They stood up slowly, their legs shaking to hold their support. Can I ask why exactly I'm carrying 5 times the load they are? Naruto demanded, pointing at said load. You're a former shinobi, you can deal with it. Now get moving. He pulled out a kunai. If you're not moving before I count to 3, I am not pulling you out of the water. 1. They got the point and ran for the waterfall that showered water into the shallow, rocky creek. This is for your own good. If you want to get through the final exam, then you have to do everything I tell you. We still hate you. They shouted at him. What a big surprise, he remarked sarcastically. Now get climbing. They wandered through the village, having left Momo with Appa and Fanning. People glanced at them but didn't really say anything. Unlike the incident a couple of days earlier where the villagers stared daggers because of Naruto's presence, they minded their own business once the smaller group continued their way. You know, I'm kinda glad we're here, Aang remarked as they walked. People don't see me as the Avatar here. They just think I'm a normal kid. A normal kid would have hair on the top of his hair and no arrow tattoo on it either, Toph remarked, making the others laugh. It's a part of my culture. In case you haven't noticed, this is not a place of your culture, Suki told him. They weren't anywhere near an air temple. Azula was more concerned about what they were supposed to be doing. Aren't we supposed to be looking for a place to practice? How about we use the space over there? Toph suggested, pointing to her left. Their gazes followed her finger. Toph? Said Katara. That's a fence. I mean what's beyond the fence, Katara. There's a big field there and it's completely empty. So long as we don't get over-destructive and hit the building, we'll be fine. She walked over to the fence and leapt over it. Suki looked at the others. Can we think of anything else? Probably not, Azula admitted. We might as well go with it. She followed Toph's example. Katara, Suki, and Aang followed. Well, it certainly has the room, Aang remarked as he looked around. It does look like a training area. It was big, flat, and had nothing that could be an obstacle in the way. So, how do we want to do this? Katara asked. We test his ability with each element, Toph stated. Since we don't have another airbender, Suki can take care of that. Not a problem, Suki agreed. We go in the cycle Aang learned, Azula decided. Once the next person feels like it, they'll step in and take over the fight. Anyone have a problem with that? No, Aang answered. So, who's going to start? He was all set to go. Me, Suki answered, just before charging him. Although it caught him by surprise, he recovered. She threw a set of punches at him. He twisted and turned, staying out of their path. Seeing an opportunity, he got around her and placed his hand on her back. The idea was that no matter how she turned, he turned with her. However, she had trained with him before, so she knew how to get out of the predicament. She dropped low and tried to sweep his legs out from under him. He leapt back to avoid falling to the ground. She followed him by turning around and rolling forward. As she came out of the roll, she snapped a kick at his knees. Once he took a step back to avoid it, she followed through with the kick by standing up. Come on, Aang, she told him. You're supposed to be airbending at me, not dodging. Sorry, it's a part of the airbending training, he apologized. I'm not trying to hurt you. Don't worry about hurting me. Just use your airbending. That was the whole point of the spar. Right. She came at him again, this time using kicks as well as punches. Aang started off slow. He used his airbending to make her punches or kicks miss slightly. Then he began to indirectly attack her. He pressed forward, but always kept moving around. This allowed him to distract her while also sending blasts of air at her. It forced her to give ground so she wouldn't be hit by the air blasts. He took that advantage and began to use air swipes via his staff. If he ever gets the attitude to able to kill, those air swipes of his will be deadly, she thought as she was forced to bend backwards to avoid a swipe. She tried to turn the fight back to her advantage by getting in close. He responded by bending the air to lift her up off the ground and pushing her back. She quickly recovered and charged back at him. The charge was cut off when she had to start dodging air blasts and swipes again. She was forced to hop from one side to the other, slowing her down. How are you doing? Aang asked her as he kept bending. Why are you asking me that? She asked back. We're in the middle of training. I don't know, just because? Please don't. Tell me this isn't a habit of yours. She rolled out of the air he was bending. But he followed and she was forced to keep hopping. Well, no. But you're my friend, not my enemy. Why shouldn't I talk to you? Because you should be focusing on your opponent, Katara told him. And not talking to your friends. She bent the water out of her pouch and threw it at him. As he caught it and threw it back, Suki stepped back out of the fight. Katara caught the water, split it in half and threw both at him. He redirected one back at her but kept one for his own use. He then bent the water he kept into a water whip and swung it at her. She blocked it with her own water whip. She pressed forward, swinging the water whip at his feet. He fell back, dodging the whip. Seeing an advantage, she threw the whip at him and froze it, turning it into a spear of ice. He managed to catch the spear in his own water and sent it back in a deluge. She didn't move fast enough and was sent flying into a tree. She did, however, manage to melt the ice spear in the water before it pierced her. She was dazed from the hit, but the advantage was with her. Aang had thrown all his water at her and left himself with none. Realizing his mistake, he tried to bend some of the water back to himself. But Katara had managed to shake herself out of her daze. She bent most of the water back to her, but he managed to grab some of it. However, if you were to compare the amount of water either of them had, she had the bigger amount. This almost feels like when I fought Master Pakku, she thought. Only I'm not the student. It was true. If she gave it her all, she could easily beat Aang in waterbending. But the last time she tried to give it her all was when she was hunting Yan Rha, so she wasn't really going to give it her all. She bent the water into a wall in front of her. She plunged her hands into the wall, and then withdrew them. She froze the water on her fingers into claws of ice. She swung a hand and fired the claws. Aang rolled to the side, avoiding them. She followed through with the other set. As he came out of the roll, he leapt straight up into the air to avoid the second set. The small amount of water, which he had carried through the roll, was now circling his waist. As he landed, he bent the water into a whip and used it to block further sets of ice claws thrown at him. This exchange went on for quite a bit. Katara would throw ice claws and the occasional ice spear at him. He would use the water whip to either knock the ice aside or deflect it back at Katara, who either dodged or caught it effortlessly. As it went on, Katara began to lose the water she had. The deflected ice was scattered all around them. Some hit trees, others hit the ground, and a small number had hit the nearby building. Thankfully, none of it had pierced the windows, otherwise the training session would have ended shortly afterwards. Finally, she couldn't keep throwing ice at him due to the low amount of water she had left. He had tried to outpace her, and succeeded. The amount of water they had changed, he now had the bigger amount. But before he could do anything, he had to duck to avoid a rock aimed at his head. "My turn," Toph declared. Katara acted swiftly, and snagged Aang's water away from him as she stepped back. Aang quickly assumed an earth-bending stance. He struck first by off-balancing Toph, bending the earth beneath her upwards into a column. Then he struck, destroying the column. Toph fell back to the ground. She recovered and then bent a rock line at him. As the line reached him, she bent a column to jet out at him. He threw a spinning kick at them, breaking them apart. The rubble surrounded him, and he took advantage of that. He sent a barrage of rocks at her. She defended herself by knocking the rocks to the ground. After she had reduced the last rock to dust with a punch, she bent 2 rocks of her own and threw them at him. He bent up a wall from the ground to protect himself from the rocks. Once they had smashed into it, he sent pieces of the wall at her, almost like what she did at the earth rumble. She sidestepped one piece, leapt over the second and swatted the third away, smashing it to pieces. He bent a column out of the ground, but it wasn't for protection. Starting from the bottom, he bent discs of rock at her. She tried to stop them by bending a wall up, but the first disc smashed through the wall, and the others followed. Toph was forced to keep moving. If she tried to block one of the discs, the weight would probably send her flying. After he was done with the column, he bent the remains into a gauntlet on his right hand. He charged forward at her, drawing back the gauntlet into a punch. That was what she was waiting for. As the punch flew at her, she grabbed hold and bent it down to the ground, taking him with it. He hit the ground and the gauntlet shattered, spraying bits of rock everywhere. She tried to send him flying by jutting a column underneath him. But even though he had hit the ground and was a little dazed, he managed to recover and roll out of the way. Seeing him roll away, she bent a rock from nearby and threw it hard at him. He covered himself in a sphere of rocks, protecting himself from the rock. Once it had smashed against the sphere, he broke it apart and sent it at her in a deluge of rock and dirt. As it was about to hit her, she plunged her hands into it and split it apart. The 2 parts of the deluge were bent around her and slammed into the ground behind her. They stared at each other, a little worn but still good to go. They waited for the other to make the first move. That's weird, he thought. Toph's not really the one to wait in a fight. He noticed that she was smiling slightly. It was that smile that warned him. He leapt back to avoid the fireball that flew through the space where his head previously was. "I guess you're up now?" he asked Azula. She didn't answer him, preferring to bend another fireball. He blocked it with his own. As Toph stepped away, they circled each other. Azula moved first by dropping low and swiping her leg, sending a low wave of fire at him. He blocked by bending his own fire to disrupt it. He turned in a circle and bent a blast of fire at her head. She spun to the side, bending out a fire whip and swinging it at him. He swatted it aside with his own fire whip. After exchanging a few blows with the whips, Aang took his and threw it in a fire blast at her. She deflected it, sending it upwards and quickly sent her own fire blast at him. He bent his fire into the form of a shield to block the blast. He was successful, but he skidded backwards as well. She pressed forward and bent her fire into daggers. She got in close to him and started to swing. He tried to attack back, but her strikes kept him from doing so. He was forced to duck and weave while she used her fire daggers. He finally got the chance when she left herself open after a particular strike. He moved around and bent a fire blast at her back. Seeing what he was doing, she lifted her foot up and knocked his hands aside, sending the blast away. She then spun around on one foot and bent a fire arc at him. He jumped back in a flip to avoid the arc. As he was airborne, he thrust his feet out into a kick, bending fire at her. Not only did it stop her from attacking, it gave him some extra push to land further away. When she saw the fire coming at her, she split it into 2 and slammed them into the ground on either side of her. Just as Aang's feet touched the ground, she sent another low fire wave at him. He threw himself into a backflip to avoid it, and then bent a fire arc at her with his leg. She disrupted the fire with a kick, splitting it in half and making it dissipate in the air. They stared at each other for a brief minute. Then they did the exact same thing, bending a stream of fire at each other. The streams collided and the struggle to push the other one back began. It was something to see. Blue fire fought with orange. One would look like it was devouring the other for a brief moment before pushed back. At one point, Azula would have the upper hand. The next Aang would have it. Eventually, the streams died down, and they were left panting lightly. Okay, I think we're good, Aang said. Not yet, Twinkle Toes, Toph said. There's one more thing we have to do. What's that? He asked, turning to face her. She just grinned. 4-on-1. She, Katara, Azula, and Suki all charged him. The idea was to see how he would do against multiple benders and a non-bender at the same time. However, before they could even start attacking, they heard someone say ahem. They saw a man with tan skin, brown hair he wore in a ponytail, dark eyes and a scar across his nose. He wore the Konoha shinobi uniform, which was blue pants and a blue shirt, along with the green flak jacket and the headband around his forehead. Hello, my name is Irika Yumino. I'm an instructor at the Konoha Academy, he greeted them. May I ask what exactly you are doing the Academy's backyard? He asked while fiddling with a kunai. The threat was all but screaming in the silence. They looked around and saw that despite their efforts not to go overboard, they had torn up the place rather impressively. The yard was a complete and utter mess. They then looked up and saw that at every window, kids were looking out and watching them. Oops, offered a sheepish Aang. Jiraiya stared at the bodies lying around. You all should just give up right now and save yourselves the trouble of losing in the final exam, he told them with disappointment. Now get up. Can we please have a moment to lie here in pain? Sokka pleaded. Akela, who was lying on his side, whined in agreement. Moments over, up. They struggled to get back up. Although their bodies protested, they managed to get into a sitting position. Now tell me, where did you all go wrong just now? I don't know. Why don't you enlighten us? Naruto asked sarcastically. Jiraiya's response was to smack him in the back of the head. Oh. What was that for? I asked you all a serious question and you decided to be a smartass about it. You told us to attack you and we did, only to get thoroughly beaten to a pulp, Zuko answered. Wrong. He shouted at them. If they had the energy, they would have leapt back. I told you to attack me as a group. Instead, you all attacked me as individuals. We did come at you as a group, Naruto told him. We attacked you at the same time. And that's all you did, he roared. When one person tried to attack me, the others would back off so they wouldn't interfere. I can't believe you went with it. He glared at Naruto. The blonde should have known better than that. Hey, if this was a battlefield, I'd been doing something different than staying back, the Fire Paragon retorted. This is a battlefield. If you want to survive the final exam, every one of you must be able to fight in tandem with each other. But I thought that the final exam was fought one-on-one, Sokka said. You can never be too sure. Now try attacking me again. With no warning, he lunged at them. They rolled back away from him, grabbing their blades off the ground. What? No warning? Naruto asked as they stood up. I thought you knew that you didn't get any warnings in the real world. He looked at them as they moved into their stances. Akela bared his teeth. I hope swords aren't the only things in your arsenal. They looked at each other and nodded once. Sokka pulled out his boomerang. Zuko heated the edges of his Dao swords with his fire bending. Naruto created 3 more clones and they all moved into a different bending form. Better, but I'm still not impressed. Then let us impress you, Zuko said as they all charged at him. After apologizing several times, Aang and the others tried to repair the backyard. Toph, that's the last time we let you pick the place to train, Katara told her as she bent the water and ice scattered around back into her pouch, melting the ice as she went. I know, Toph replied as she and Aang mended the earth, putting rocks back in the ground and putting the remnants of the walls and columns back down into the ground. Pardon me if I thought it was just a random building and not where they teach the kids. Some of those kids are the same age as you and Aang, Azula remarked drily as she put the small fires that had fallen to the ground. You really can't call them kids. Have they gone through the same things we have? No. Then I can call them kids as much as I like, she declared defiantly. She's got you there, Suki commented to Azula. Shut up. In any case, we're all done here, Aang stated. The backyard was more or less back to the way it was. Let's go find that instructor and tell him. They walked back into the academy, climbing the stairs to the second floor. They were going to find him in his classroom, however, they ran into him in the hallway, him and his class. Hey, we're done out there, Toph told him, pointing her thumb behind her. She was about to say something else when the class swarmed them. That fight was so cool, one girl squealed. You guys were so awesome, another told them. Hey, can you show me how to use fire like that? One boy asked Azula. Please teach me how to move rocks like you did, another begged Toph. Show us your moves, Aomyeon told Suki. Iruka whistled loudly, getting everyone's attention. That's enough, class, he told them. Now give them some room. The kids did so reluctantly. He turned his attention back to the newcomers. Thank you for doing that. It was our mess, Azula replied. Therefore, we had to clean it up. Well, at least you admit it. That's something I can honestly say some of my students won't do. He looked back at the class, making some of them take a keen interest in the wall. So, how do you like Konoha so far? It's very nice, Katara answered honestly. We've looked around since we've come here. There are so many things to see. The air feels so clean and fresh around here, Aang commented. I haven't felt that in a while. That's good to know, Iruka replied. Was there anything you wanted to know about our village? Well, we have been wondering about the faces up on the mountain, Suki told him. But we haven't really bothered to ask anyone about them. Then you're in luck, he declared with a smile. We were about to go talk about the previous Hokages. Would you like to come with us? We would be honored, Azula answered. Lead the way. They left the academy and walked over to the Hokage building. They made their way through the building before finally climbing up to the roof. Iruka had the students sit down while Aang and the others stood at the back. Is everyone here? He asked. Everyone answered in the affirmative. Good. Now, as most of you know, behind me is the Hokage mountain. On it are the faces of the Hokages. From left to right, they are the Shodame Hokage, Nidame Hokage, Sandame Hokage, Yandame Hokage, and finally, the Godame Hokage. One student raised her head. Who is the Rokudame Hokage, Iruka-sensei? She asked. Before he could answer the student, someone else did. What? Do I have to retire already? They all turned around to see Tsunade standing at the stairs. In her arms was a small pig wearing a red jacket and collar of pearls. I've only been the Hokage for about 3 years. Have I really been doing that bad of a job? La Lady Hokage, squeaked the girl. No. You've been doing a great job. Now you're just buttering me up before talking about some bad habits I have. No, I wasn't. I swear. This only made her laugh. Lady Tsunade, could you please not tease my students? Iruka asked her. Just having a little fun, Iruka, she told him, the grin on her face making her look like she was a mischievous young girl. The pig looked up at her and winked. All right, Taunton, I'll stop. She looked back at Iruka. So, giving a history lesson? Yes, Lady Tsunade. What brings you out here? He asked her. I'm taking a small break from the paperwork, so I figured I'd come up here and get some fresh air. You've come at a good time. Would you like to join us? Why not? She walked forward and stood next to him. As you know, Lady Tsunade is the Godame Hokage, he told his students and visitors. She is a part of the Sannin, and renowned for her strength and her medical skills. She is also the holder of the slug summoning contract, and because of this, is known as the Slug Princess of Konoha. As the students looked at her with wonder and amazement, Azula looked with curiosity. How is she qualified to be Hokage? She asked aloud, getting everyone's attention. Did you not listen to what Iruka just said? Toph asked her. Yes, I'm aware of what she can do, Toph. But there are many people here who are probably just as skilled as her or possibly better. So how did she get the position as the village leader over the others? Mainly because the other candidate refused when he was told, and then offered to go get me, Tsunade told her drily. But you do have a point, what qualifies me to be the Hokage? She looked over at Iruka. He got the point and explained. While Lady Tsunade is a renowned shinobi and medic, those are not the only things that contributed to her being Hokage. Another important factor is her lineage. Her lineage? Repeated Aang, a little confused. Who your parents were wasn't really a big thing among the air nomads. Yes. Lady Tsunade is the granddaughter of the first Hokage, the grandniece of the second Hokage, and the student of the third Hokage, he explained. Basically, she has the best claim. And that's all there is to it. She walked past the students and back to the stairs, only to stop at the top and look back. Azula, was it? She asked. Yes, she answered. Follow me, please. I want to talk to you. Zuko, Sokka, and Naruto were engaged in a free-for-all, using only their swords. They did this while also dodging kunai and shuriken thrown at them by Jiraiya. Agni! Zuko swore as a kunai pierced his thigh. You're too slow, Zuko, Jiraiya told him. I'm fighting at my top speed here. Then you need to be faster. Any slower and a genin fresh out of the academy could beat you. I don't see you doing this, Sokka shouted at him as he simultaneously parried one of Zuko's Dao swords and dodging a shuriken. However, he got another shuriken in the arm because of his dodging. You need to be more aware of your surroundings, Sokka, the old shinobi shouted at him. I'm trying. Trying isn't good enough. People who try are the ones who fail. How many times have you tired, only to fail? Who asked you? He snarled. The snarl turns to a scream of pain as a kunai embedded itself in his leg. You must focus. If you hadn't lost control of your emotions, you could have avoided that. I hate you with every inch of my being. Heard it before, now focus. The tribesman turned his attention back to the fight. It continued for a good amount of time. It kept moving around the training ground, because a sword fight never stays in one spot, and Jiraiya kept making them be aware of their surroundings. Finally, Jiraiya stopped throwing things at them. All right, that's enough, he told them. They collapsed to the ground when they heard that, sighs of relief escaping their mouths. Akela padded over to Sokka's side and sat down. So, can you tell me what exactly the three of you doing wrong was? We were talking to you while we were fighting? Naruto asked with tried sarcasm. Yes, that is a part of it, but that is not all. Naruto, your ability to fight with a Jien is somewhat sloppy. You're not a master of it, are you? Of course not, it was just something in my arsenal, the blonde replied. The Jien master here is Sokka. He was more inclined to have the thing lost or destroyed. Maybe he should just stop trying. That's another thing. The Toad Sage turned his attention to Sokka. Sokka, while you are able to use your Jien and your boomerang effectively when they're separate, you are horrible at using them together. Hey, I have never seen the reason to use them at the same time. It's usually been one or the other, the Water Paragon said in explanation. You have to learn how to use them together. There'll come a time when you will have to, and if you don't learn how, you'll end up dead. He turned to Zuko. Zuko, why weren't you using your fire bending in the fight? It would have given you an advantage. You told me not to, he protested. I told you not to use it when it wasn't needed. You took that as not being allowed to use it. This was a sword fight. And your point is? Just because it was a sword fight doesn't mean you have to stick with swords. A sword fight is a fight, and you can use anything that gives you the advantage in a fight. Now what are we going to do? Naruto asked. Climb the waterfall again with stones on our backs? Making us run the entire place 40 times in under 10 minutes? Sokka asked. Or is it going to be repeating the same set of movements while standing still for 5 hours? Zuko asked. It's none of those, Jiraiya answered, surprising them. You've been doing a little better than pathetic, but I can't blame you. This is only the first day of your training. He turned away from them. I'm going to get food. You all take a breather. He walked away into the bush. They turned to look at each other. Did I hear him right? Sokka asked. I heard our personal torturer say that we could take a breather and relax a bit, Naruto replied. Did I hear wrong? No, I heard it too, Zuko told him. So, we can actually relax for a little? Sokka asked for clarification. Not yet, Naruto said. We have to do one more thing. They all raised their arms and looked at what was embedded there. Pull these out, they said together. It was a painful process, one they did with gritted teeth. Azula stood in the Hokage's office, facing her across her desk. Well, you wanted to talk to me, she said. What do you want to talk about? Tsunade looked her straight in the eye. What exactly is your relationship with Naruto? She asked. I assumed that since Jiraiya was spying on us, he sent you reports. He did. Then why do you want to know about what went on with us? It's always better to hear from the person than read it off a piece of paper, the Hokage said in reply. I can agree with that. So, what is your relationship with Naruto? He is my bodyguard, the former princess of the Fire Nation answered. So, he protects you? That is what a bodyguard does, she replied sarcastically. I suppose you chose him and you two didn't get along well at first? Wrong. He beat me in an Agni Kai and won the right to be my bodyguard. But you still didn't get along at first, right? It took some time to get used to him being around all the time, she admitted. That, and he acted exactly like I remembered him. And what was that? Tsunade asked, sounding curious. Why should I be telling you this? I want to know. She sighed in annoyance but with some nostalgia. He was insufferable, acted smug every time he was proven right, and kept pulling pranks on me just for a laugh. There were days where I wanted to kill him. And yet, he's still alive, the older woman remarked. I guess you began to see something else in him? She nodded. I began to see his good points. He was kind and caring. He never refused to give some of the money he earned to those who desperately needed it. He was friendly to all and only showed his anger to those who deserved it. He kept pulling pranks to make me laugh. When he led men into a fight, he always made sure to get every soldier under his command out alive. He never bragged about his feats or his strengths. He was someone you could count on. And then you fell in love with him. It would have been hard not to. He changed me. He all but dragged me out of the comfortable place I knew as my life, and showed me what was really going on. He made me think about old things in different ways. He forced me to train myself with new things. He had me see things from another's perspective. He changed me and I fell in love with him. She placed her fingers on the necklace around her neck. He even gave me this. That got Tsunade's attention. Let me see that, she ordered when she saw the necklace. Why should I? That is supposed to be with Naruto. I gave it to him. He's supposed to keep it on at all times. What in the name of the spirits are you talking about? Azula demanded. That necklace belonged to my grandfather. I inherited it, and then gave it to Naruto. The slug sage reached out her hand. Now give it to me. No. She closed her hand around it, as if to protect it from her. She stood up from her chair, clearly angry. That belongs to Naruto. And Naruto gave it to me as a birthday present, she replied, just as angry. Why would he do something like that if he needed to keep it? Tsunade looked at her, then at the necklace, and then sat back down in the chair. That baka, she muttered to her quietly. Does he not realize what the necklace is for? Why would he give it to her? Excuse me? Azula asked, having only heard parts of what she was muttering. Never mind, it doesn't concern you. You sound just like him, she said with annoyance. What do you mean? Until we came here, I didn't know much about Naruto's past. He never told us where he came from or why he left, he just kept telling us that it doesn't concern us. We only began to find out about him when your team started to protect the Avatar, and even then, it was just tidbits of information. I see, the Hokage said. That's good. Neither her or the others know about what he holds, she thought to herself. So you love Naruto, but you don't much about him. Yes, I do. What about it? She said nothing. She flashed her hands through a quick number of hand seals and then placed her hand on her desk. Azula saw kanji briefly flash on the desk before fading away. Even though nothing in the room, she felt like her ears had been plugged up a little. What was that? Tsunade took her hand away from the desk and leaned back in her chair. What would you say if I told you that after the Chunin exams, I would let Naruto to go back to the Bending countries? I would say that there would have to be a catch. She nodded in agreement. The girl caught on quick. What would you say if I told you that I would have the members of the Konoha 11 here go with you to help? I would say that their help would be unneeded and that they would only hinder us. Are you sure about that? The Hokage asked her with a raised eyebrow. She didn't raise to the challenge. I would also say that is not the catch. What would you say if I told you that I would send the Konoha 11 in order to keep an eye on Naruto, and had orders to make sure he came back to Konoha willingly? I would say that it would never happen. There was a moment of silence. What would you say if I told that if he refused, they would have orders to subdue him, to bring him back by force, and once he was back, the past 3 years would be wiped from his memory? She turned furious and covered her hands in blue fire. I would kill them before that happens, she shouted. And if you gave that order, I would burn you to ashes. After staring her straight in the eyes, Tsunade did something Azula wasn't expecting. She laughed. Kami, I was right about you. What? She stood from the chair. Put the fire out, Azula. Remember, I used the words what and if. The fire disappeared, but the anger and suspicion in her eyes did not. Explain, she ordered. While there are orders for Naruto to have his memory wiped if he refuses to come back willingly, those orders are never going to happen. The reason I am telling you this is because I believe that out of the 5 of your group here in the village, you and Suki are the most level-headed. However, you know Naruto better than Suki, so I told you. Told me what? This wasn't making any sense. And she would like it to make sense. I want you to listen closely. She walked around the desk so the two of them stood face to face. The Konoha 11 members here have been told of these orders. But they think that the orders will be carried out when they are done in the bending countries. So, I'll have to kill them before they try it, she growled. That might be true, if they were going. She was beginning to get really annoyed by it all. You're not making sense. I know I am not. I'm doing that on purpose, the Hokage remarked. What is this all about? I'm telling you this because I want you to keep the rest of your team calm. There is a good chance that they will hear the Konoha 11 talking about these orders. I need you to make sure they don't think anything of it, and make sure they don't plan anything. Why? If they did, they could ruin the plan. I cannot let that happen. What plan? I can't tell you. I'm sorry. This is shinobi politics, isn't it? She asked, remembering what Naruto told her and the others. Tsunade gave a small smile and nodded quietly. It's often dangerous and deadly. But if you play it right, the rewards are very satisfying. Now you're going to keep quiet about this conversation, right? Of course I will. She had been in politics long enough to realize when she had to be quiet. But you do realize that Katara Aang and the others are probably trying to listen in through the door? The smile turned into a smirk. After I touched my desk, you felt your ears plugged up slightly, right? Yes. That was the silence seal taking effect. This conversation we just had was one that only the two of us heard, she explained to the firebender. You're sure about that? It seemed a little far-fetched to Azula. Of course, I'm sure. It's my office. What will we do now? I am going to deactivate the seal and you will leave. For all intents and purposes, we just talk about Naruto. I wanted to know how he was during the past 3 years. Sound good? Yes, it does. She walked back to her chair, placed her hand on the seal spot and muttered Kai. Azula's ears lost the plugged-up feeling as the silence seal faded away. Thank you for telling me about him, Princess Azula, Tsunade said, acting like nothing had happened. I'm not a princess, she told her. But you're welcome, Lady Hokage. She turned around and walked to the door. She opened it and swung it open. She saw Aang and Katara standing against the wall with oh so innocent smiles on their faces. Didn't anyone tell you it's rude to eavesdrop? She asked. Toph and Suki were off to the side, just waiting. What? We weren't eavesdropping, Aang protested. Of course you weren't, and I'm the incarnation of Agni. It was clear she wasn't going to believe any excuse they might have. Sorry, Azula, Katara apologized. We couldn't hear anything, so we got curious. So you were listening in before that, she said, catching them with their own words. Well, no kidding. The boss lady of the village wants to talk to you and you alone, leaving us out here? Of course, they're going to try and listen in, Toph said, cutting them off before they could protest. They walked away from the office. Lady Tsunade thought the same thing. That's why she gave us some privacy. What did she want to talk to you about? Suki asked, genuinely curious. She wanted to know about Naruto. That's it? Aang asked in disbelief. He was a shinobi of this village once, she pointed out as they reached the stairs. She wanted to know how he's been for the past 3 years, that's all. Why didn't she ask one of us? Katara asked. She looked her straight in the eyes. Okay, please remember who has known him the best for the better part of 3 years. She's got you there, Sugar Queen, Toph said with a laugh. Katara's face flushed for asking something that was completely obvious. Well, now what are we going to do? She asked, trying to change the subject. Suki looked out a nearby window. Why don't we get something to eat? She suggested. It's about noon. Yeah, let's go to Ichiraku's, Aang declared. Fine, Azula said, shrugging her shoulders. That was all Aang needed to hear. He ran down the corridor so fast he left a dust trail. I didn't think Twinkle Toes liked that place, Toph said. Don't they have a lot of meats in the food? They have a veggie ramen which he's beginning to love to death, Katara explained. Wait a moment, I thought Aang wasn't carrying the money we were given, Suki said, remembering the money bag the Konoha 11 had given them. He's not, Azula told her, pulling the money bag out. We might as well go after him, before he orders anything. They all nodded in agreement and chased after him. The sun was setting in the distance. Naruto, Sokka and Zuko were sitting around and were in the midst of pulling out the kunai and shuriken and wrapping the wounds up. Agni, that stings. Zuko swore as he wrapped up his arm. I hear that, Sokka agreed as he wrapped a bandage around his thigh. Naruto was feeling the same pain they were feeling due to the fact Jiraiya had him stop the Kyuubi from healing him. Oh, how I hate that pervert right now, he thought viciously as he wrapped up his hand. Hey, he said you weren't going to miss out on any part of the training, the Kyuubi told him. I guess that means the pain part as well. I still hate the pervert. He's a super pervert, remember? Shut up. Well, I think we can all agree on one thing, Sokka said aloud for everyone to hear. That our teacher for a month is a sadistic bastard? The blonde asked him. Yes. But there's something else too. And what's that? He's not kidding around. I think that after the month is up, we won't be the same as we were before. They fell quiet as they thought about what he said. It made sense. Jiraiya was trying to kill them, but they were getting stronger. He's still a sadistic bastard, Zuko said. Akela barked in agreement. I'm glad you all hold me in so high esteem, Jiraiya said from behind them. Surprised, they turned around and saw he was carrying a big boar on his back. Is that for us? Sokka asked, almost drooling at the boar. No. This is my dinner. You have to get your own. What? They all shouted at him. They were too tired to try and hunt for their own food. His serious face sprouted a huge grin as he threw back his head in laughter. I'm kidding. There's enough to go around, and even though you guys didn't do well today, you deserve this. He dropped the boar to the ground. Now, while I start the fire, you three take care of the boar. He left to gather the sticks for the fire, and they got to work skinning the boar. Sokka took the lead due to the fact he had done skinning before. Naruto and Zuko followed his orders carefully. By the time Jiraiya had come back, the boar was almost skinned. He set up the fire, and then watched as they finished skinning the boar. He took the carcass, put it on a spit and hung it over the fire. He slowly turned the spit, making sure the boar was thoroughly roasted. When he was done, he carved out pieces of the meat and handed them to the team, who fell on the food with the grace and dignity of a pack of wolves, which is ironic, considering Akela was there. This is delicious, Sokka declared with tears in his eyes. I have never tasted something so good. So glad you approve, Jiraiya told him. They finished the rest of the meat in silence. So, tell me, did you enjoy today's training? We hated you every minute of the day, Naruto answered. Good to know, because this is only the first day. We have the rest of the month, and I will use that month to make you all better and stronger, even if I have to break you down and build you back up, he declared. They shared a look for a long minute, and then looked back at him. We might hate it, and we definitely hate you for it, Zuko said, speaking for the group. But bring it. The Toad Sage just gave them a vicious grin that promised a lot of work and loads of pain. Chapter 38, Meeting and Discovering. Location, Konoha. Tsunade sat at her desk, working her way through the paperwork in front of her. I need a drink, she thought. Her eyes wandered over to the sake bottle at the edge of the desk and the cup next to it. She reached out for the bottle, only to hear an angry oink come from the other side of the room. Oh, come on, Tauntaun, she said as she looked at the pig. It's just one drink. Tauntaun shook her head as she walked over to the desk, leapt up and sat in front of the bottle. She oinked again to emphasize her point. Come on. Please? All she got was an oink again. All I'm asking for is one cup. That's all, I swear. You know, this is why Shizen has her keep an eye on you, Jiraiya said from behind. She swerved to face him. You'd better have a good reason for being here, Jiraiya. Otherwise, you're going to end up flying through that window, she threatened. He raised his hands up in surrender. Easy there, princess. He looked over at the pig. It's all right, Tauntaun. She can have one drink. The pig nodded once in agreement, and walked away. He poured out enough for the cup. Here you are. This is all you get. Tsunade took and drowned it in one shot. Give me another. He shook his head with a stubborn set in his jaw. No, you only get one. You do remember what's happening today, right? Of course I remember. Why do you think I'm trying to have some sake? That's not funny, Tsunade. It was worth a shot. She glared at the cup. Besides, I can't remember the last time they showed up for the final exam when one of their genin wasn't in it. There is a first time for everything, he remarked. Oh, shut up. They fell silent. It lasted for a couple minutes. How are they doing? The Hokage finally asked. You've had a month. They'd progressed fairly well. Is that all? He looked at her. If you wanted to ask about Naruto, just say so. Well? She wasn't in the mood to play this game of questions with him. Neither was he. I've pushed him harder than the others. He's taken to it with minimum complaints. And apparently, I have a new nickname, the fucking sadist. A little smile twitched at her lips. That's an old one. She told him, looking back down at her cup. We just called you that behind your back. The Toad Sage was silent for about 3 seconds before he spoke again. Well, it's nice to know someone calls me that to my front now. Where are they? Due to what was going on, the only person who knew where they were was her teammate. I left them there and told them to keep training, he replied, not really answering the question. I figured with what is going on today, me being with you will help out in the long run. Will he be able to do it? You know as well as I do how much he hates him. But at the end, if he can't kill him. She left the rest of the sentence hanging, still doubting the blonde could do it. Jiraiya didn't have such problems. Tsunade, he agreed the moment I told him who he was supposed to kill. He'll be able to do it, probably with pleasure. I guess you're right. She finally put the cup down. So, while you're with me, who'll watch them? He turned to look at the pig. Taunton, could you? She shook her head. It's just for a short while. She oinked in the negative. Look, if you're worried about her, he pointed his thumb at Tsunade, don't be. I'll keep an eye on her, promise. She thought it over. After a few minutes, she nodded in agreement. Thank you. Could you come over here for a minute? She walked over to him and allowed him to put a note in her collar. She hopped off the desk and walked through to the open door. All right, pour me another, Jiraiya, Tsunade declared, grabbing the cup. Now that her pig was gone, she could indulge. No, he refused. If I do, she will find out. Oh, come on, it's just Taunton. Pardon me if I have a healthy respect for your pig. She is the only creature I know that can make Tora go back to the daimyo's wife willingly. They stood in separate parts of the training ground. Zuko was meditating underneath the cold waterfall, soaked to the bone. Sokka was meditating next to the fire, making him sweat. Naruto sat on the edge of the stream, looking over a scroll. Compared to what they had been through, this could have been a slow day. They might have indulged in relaxing, but their focus remained sharp. Sniffing something in the air, Akela stood up. What is it, Akela? Sokka asked as he opened his eyes. Zuko opened his eyes as well and Naruto put the scroll down. They all noticed a nearby bush rustle. Sokka and Zuko put a hand on their swords. When they saw a pig come through the bush, they were surprised. They just managed to keep it off their faces, and kept the hand on the hilt. Taunton, what are you doing here? Naruto asked as he stood and lit a cigarette. She winked at him and showed him the note. He walked over, took the note out, opened it and read it. Guys, I must be seen in public with the Hokage for a few hours, and since I need all of my chakra to you all nowadays, I can't use a clone. So I'm having Taunton keep an eye on you for a while. Just stick to the training regime. Jiraiya, well, that seems pretty simple, Sokka noted. Hold on, there's a postscript. Akela, if you're thinking about turning the pig into a snack, don't. I'm fairly certain Taunton will have no trouble kicking your furry rear. I'm also sure she will do it with pleasure. Akela, who had eyeing Taunton, now looked at her with a small amount of fear. She took one step towards him, and he swiftly backpedaled. The wolf being afraid of the pig, Naruto said. You've gotta admit that's funny. It's hilarious, Zuko replied. He did find it a little funny. Usually, the pig would be afraid of the wolf. So then, we keep to the regime, Sokka said. He did say that. And with no warning, he leapt out from under the waterfall, swords in hand, swinging at Naruto's head. Sokka joined him by thrusting his Jian at Naruto's stomach. He blocked both by using his own Jian and a stray kunai. Not going to give me any warnings, huh? The blonde asked jokingly as he took a drag with his free hand and blew smoke in their faces. Why would we? Sokka asked back. The forest around them grew loud with the din of a free-for-all. Azula stood in the academy's backyard. Since something special was going on, classes started later, leaving her alone. She had her daggers out and stood in front of one of the training dummies. Ever since she and Zuko fled the Fire Nation, she constantly practiced her dagger skills. She lunged at the dummy, slashing and stabbing. She went through the sets and moves Naruto had drilled into her head. She did them repeatedly. Finally, when she was done, the training dummy looked like a dog had all but torn it to shreds. I guess Naruto instructing me did actually help, she remarked, sheathing her daggers. She walked back onto the street, where she saw everyone bustling around in a hurry. Hey Azula! Called out Kiba. She turned her head to him and saw he was standing near a wall with his team as well as hers. Come over here. I'm coming. She walked over to them. What's this all about? People look like they're either trying to clean up their house or their business. She had seen plenty of that when she left the hotel to head to the academy to train. That's because today is the day that the foreign heads of state and such come in today, Shino explained. They come to the final exam to see how the participants will do. It also helps attract clients for the villages of Shinobi. It's also a good event for gambling, Hinata told them as they all left the academy backyard and headed onto the streets. Yeah, you should see the odds, Kiba agreed. Odds? Repeated a confused Aang. A way of betting money, Azula told him before turning her attention back to Kiba. What are they like? Most of the odds are on Naruto winning. But the odds on Sokka and Zuko have them losing. Ha! Damn right they will! A voice shouted in the street. They turned and saw that it was the team from Kusa. They'll be dead within 5 minutes, Su-Jetsu declared. And you are who, exactly? Suki asked. We are the other genin team that made it to the final exam, Yugo answered. So Sokka and the others will have to face off you guys? Katara asked for clarification. Man, they'll be able to win easily, Toph declared. What did you say? Su-Jetsu roared at her. It might have been scary for someone else. But considering everything they had been through, they weren't all intimidated. You heard her, didn't you? Or are you deaf? Azula asked. The glare she got was brief. Get your facts straight, you midget, he snarled at the blind earthbender. Team Avatar will be dead by the time we're done with them. So, you're going to kill us too? Aang asked. These guys were really making him scared now. It was all he could to keep his nervousness off his face. Of course not, you idiot, Karen said condescendingly. You don't concern us. But if you want to find us after the exam. Su-Jetsu left the question hanging, which scared Aang even more. Su-Jetsu, enough, Yugo said. Don't worry, I won't kill them. There wouldn't be any fun in it. Let's keep moving. He walked away with a confident swagger, his teammates behind him. No one turned their eyes away until they were out of sight. That was a little intense, Katara remarked. Are you kidding? That was nothing, Azula said. Yeah, that was normal, Kiba agreed. You have got to be joking, Aang said, almost shouting at them. Did you not see how he was looking at us? Sheesh, Twinkle Toes, Toph said back. Toughen up a little, will ya? Toph is right. If you keep acting like this, you will not last long here, Shino agreed. We're not going to stay long after this, the air nomad told him. We know. Anyway, Azula said, cutting off the conversation before it went any further, she had done this plenty of times in the past month. Are the heads of state going to come in a parade or something? No, Hinata answered. They'll come in a procession. Nobody will stand in a crowd and watch them walk in. Most of them will be led to their suites in the hotels. Most of them? Repeated Suki with a curious tone to it. A few of them will be greeted with by Lady Tsunade. Can we go watch? Katara asked. It might be interesting. Only you would find it interesting, Toph remarked. She thought it was going to be very boring. Actually, I would like to see it as well, Azula said. It is always interesting to see politics play out. You mean for you, Aang accused her in a somewhat joking manner. Comes with being an ex-princess, she said with a shrug. She turned back to Hinata and her team. So, can we? Well, we know a spot, Kiba answered. You'd have to stay quiet and stay still. We can do that. Let's get going. Follow us. Tsunade stood at the gates with Jiraiya at her side and a group of shinobi behind her. Though they didn't turn their heads to see it, they could hear Kurenai's team bringing Azula and the others into the group. They shouldn't be here, Tsunade whispered to Jiraiya. It's their choice, he whispered back. Besides, this might help out in the long run. We'll see. They stopped whispering as they saw people coming towards the gate. This was where they had to pay attention. The backbones of the other great shinobi countries were coming. In other words, the Kazekage, the Mizukage, the Raikage, and the Tsuchikage had come to Konoha. The first group was a familiar one. Greetings, Lady Tsunade, Gaara said as he stood in front of her with his retinue behind him. Lord Jiraiya. Gaara, Tsunade greeted in return. He gestured to Temari and Kankuro. You know my sister and brother? Yes, but I'm afraid I do not know who the other two members of your party are, she said, looking at the members in question. This is my sensei, Baki, and my student, Matsuri. Baki was a tall man. He wore a cloth around the top of his head and let the end cover the left side of his face. He had 2 red tattoos on the right side of his face and wore his headband around his forehead. He wore the Suna flak jacket, which was beige, had shoulder padding and pouches over the stomach. Matsuri wore the same jacket, minus the shoulder padding, over a dark shirt and skirt. She wore stockings, black gloves, and arm guards. Due to the fact of how close she stood next to Gaara, the 2 Sannin knew she was more than a student to him. Nice to meet you, Jiraiya said before noticing someone else. Who is this? He asked, looking at a person whose face was hidden by a hood. Gaara was about to tell them when the hooded member spoke. I'm surprised you don't recognize me, Lord Jiraiya, considering I acted in your movie. Acted in my movie? He looked closer, trying to see her face. Koiki Kazahana, is that you? He asked once he had a glimpse. She smiled and lowered the hood, revealing the daimyo of the Land of Spring. It's good to see you again, Lord Jiraiya. And it's a pleasure to meet you, Lady Tsunade, she greeted the Hokage. Lady Kazuhana, why are you traveling with the Kazekage? She asked. I still have trouble trusting Yukigekure shinobi. So, I traveled with Lord Gaara to come to Konoha. This would be your first time seeing a Chunin exam, yes? Yes. Why come now? She smiled. I think we both know the reason. Tsunade and Jiraiya did indeed. It had to do with a certain blonde. Fair enough, I hope you enjoy Konoha. She smiled and nodded. They walked on and let the next group come forward. Well, if it isn't the Toad Sage and the Slug Princess, the short, old man with the hat of the Tsuchikage said. His beard was done triangularly, and his mustache had angular corners. The top of his head was bald and the hair in the back was done up in a top knot held by a yellow ribbon. His eyebrows were thick, and his nose was big and red. He wore a green and yellow coat that had a red collar. Underneath the coat, he wore the flak jacket of a Wagakure and mesh armor over a shirt and pants. Ryatenda no Anoki of both scales, Jiraiya greeted the Tsuchikage politely. It's been some time since you have come here. You make it sound like I want to be here. His reply was as grumpy as his expression. If that's not it, then why are you? To see the value of potential enemies, he answered. Geez, old man, can't you say we came to see their Jinchuriki in action? The girl behind him asked. She had black hair and wore her headband around her forehead. She wore a red shirt with the right sleeve missing. She wore the same flak jacket as Anoki, which was brown, had a pouch over the stomach and a sleeve that covered her left arm, showing only the black gloves she wore. Once she had uttered those words, 2 killing intents were directed at her. If I were you, young lady, Tsunade growled, I would refrain from calling him that in Jiraiya's or my presence. Why should I? She asked back with cocky defiance. We know what Jinchuriki means. Kuratsuchi, be polite. She is the Hokage, the 3rd member of the group, a large man with big cheeks and a pumped nose, told her. He wore a red shirt and pants along with a flak jacket. He had on a scarf, and wore his headband like a bandana. I don't have to be polite to her, Akatsuki. I don't follow her. Besides, aren't our 2 villages considered enemies? But she is still someone to respect. She clearly didn't believe that. Enough! Anoki shouted, cutting her off before she could speak again. The 2 of you are going to give me back pains. You may be my granddaughter, Kuratsuchi, but that does not mean you can be disrespectful to the other kages. You will apologize to the Hokage right now. Alright, old man, I'll apologize. She turned to face Tsunade. I'm sorry, okay? Even they both knew she really wasn't. Tsunade and Inoki let it slide. The IWA shinobi walked on and the next group came forward. Lady Tsunade, Lord Jiraiya, it's an honor to meet you, the woman with the hat of the Mizukage greeted them. She was slender and quite fetching too. She had auburn hair that fell to the back of her ankles. She had also tied some of it into a top knot, and some of it also covered her right eye. Her visible eye was green. She wore a blue dress that fell to just below her knees. Underneath the dress, she wore mesh armor. She also wore a belt around her waist with a pouch on the back. She wore high-heeled sandals along with shin guards that went up over her knees. Mai Terumi, we are glad to welcome the 5th Mizukage to Konoha, Tsunade greeted her. Your efforts to bring Kiri away from its dark past are becoming well known, Jiraiya complimented her. If this had been any other time, he would have been grinning perversely at her. But this wasn't the time. He might be a super pervert, but he also knew when to rein it in. You flatter me, Lord Jiraiya. However, I would like to discuss trading and political ties with Konoha, the Mizukage said to them both. I'll be sure to meet with you, Tsunade promised. Thank you. May I introduce my guards, Ao and Chojuro? Ao was a middle-aged man. His hair was blue and pointed upwards. His right eye was covered by an eye patch. He wore talismans from his ears, and he wore a striped, gray suit with a green haori over. Chojuro also had blue hair, but his was tufty. He wore square, black-rimmed hair over his dark eyes. He also wore a blue, pinstriped shirt and camouflage pants. On each pants leg was a shuriken holster. He wore a holster bearing his headband over his shirt. Strapped to the back of the holster was an odd-looking sword covered in bandages, save for the 2 handles. That's the Hiramikari, isn't it? Jiraiya asked Chojuro, looking at the sword. You're a member of the 7 shinobi swordsmen of the mist, aren't you? Yes I am, he answered hesitantly. Chojuro, how many times have I told you to be more confident? Ao snapped at him. Enough, you two, Mai said. Please do not fight in front of our hosts. She paused and looked at Chojuro. But Ao is right, Chojuro. You should be more confident. Yes, Lady Mai. They walked on and the next group came forward. Lord Raikage, welcome to Konoha, Jiraiya greeted the man wearing the hat of the Raikage. Jiraiya, Tsunade, he curtly greeted in return. He was a tall man with dark skin. He had a very muscular build, like he worked out constantly. He wore his blonde hair combed back and had a small mustache as well as a beard. He wore simple pants and no shirt, just a haori over his upper body. On his arms were thick, golden bangle bracelets. He also wore a gold belt that had the face of a boar engraved upon it. Boss, it doesn't hurt to be polite, one of his guards told him. The guard was tall and dark-skinned as well. He had shaggy white hair while also having a lazy look. He wore a sleeveless, high-collared uniform with baggy pants. He wore the Kumo flak jacket, which was white and had only one strap, over the uniform. On his left shoulder was a tattoo of the kanji for lightning, while on his right shoulder was the kanji for water. Darui, why are you telling Lord A what to do? Asked the other guard. His skin was white, while his hair was blonde and his eyes were dark. He wore a black shirt and pants with the flak jacket over the shirt. He also wore black arm guards that ran up to his elbows as well as red and white shin guards over sandals. He wore his headband on his forehead. Hey, I'm just saying, see, Darui replied. Darui, see, be quiet, A ordered them. Yes, Lord A, they replied. And not a word out of you, B, he warned the 4th member of their group. The man had a muscular build, same as the Raikage, and also had dark skin. He also had blonde hair, which was combed back, and a goatee. He wore oval sunglasses, so no one could see his eyes. The cloth on his headband, which he wore on his forehead, was white. On his left cheek was a blue tattoo of 2 bull horns and on his right shoulder was the kanji for iron. He wore a simple pair of dark pants, which had 2 white straps on each leg. On his arms were handguards and on his legs were shin guards, both were red and white. Instead of a shirt, he wore a flak jacket and a white scarf. He also wore a long red rope belt around his waist. On his back, strangely enough, were 7 swords. Please, brother. You think Killer Bee is gonna speak? You'll use your iron claw and I won't see for a week, he replied in a rapping style. For those who hadn't heard his rapping, they just looked at him like he had sprouted a second head. Damn it, B, how many times have I told you to stop rapping? The Raikage shouted at him. Do I have to count? Because if I do, I'm sure you'll punch my lights out. Killer B, as entertaining as always, Jiraiya greeted him. Lo and behold, I see a fellow member of getting knocked out cold. Jiraiya the Toad Sage, you look like you haven't changed. Fool, you fool. Your rapping still needs work. Is that little Uchiha in town? B looked around as he spoke. I want to go at him again and knocked him to the ground. That's not why we came here, B, and you know it, the Raikage told him. I assume you are here for the same reason the other Kage are? Tsunade asked. Of course it is, a new voice spoke from behind them. That's why we came too. Everyone turned to see who spoke. They were both surprised and shocked to see it was Kisame. But he wasn't alone. All the known members of the Akatsuki were there as well. They all became alert when the recognition finally seeped through. The guards from Kumo stood in front of B, ready to defend him. What are you all doing here? Demanded A. Are you all so confident that you'll try to take him in broad daylight? No, Itachi spoke. That was not our intent at all. Then what are you doing here? Especially you, Itachi? Asked Tsunade. It's almost like you want us to try and take you. If you do that, then Amigekyo will have no choice but to declare war on Konoha, a different voice announced. The person speaking could not be seen, but people could tell it was a woman just by the voice. Jiraiya froze. Not only did he know the voice belonged to a woman, but he had heard it before, when it sounded much younger. Conan, is that you? He called out. The members of Akatsuki were surprised by the fact Jiraiya apparently knew the person talking, although they were able not show their surprise on their faces. Stand aside, the person ordered them. They backed away. The person was indeed a woman, and quite a beautiful one too. She had blue hair, amber eyes, wore lavender eyeshadow and had a elaborate piercing. In her hair, she wore a paper flower. Her facial expression was a neutral one. Whatever she wore was covered by the cloak of the Akatsuki covering her. It has been a long time, Jiraiya-sensei, she said. Did she say Jiraiya-sensei? The other shinobi asked silently in their heads. The only exception was Tsunade. I remember you, the Hokage said, looking at the woman. You were one of those orphans Jiraiya took care of. Indeed I am, Lady Tsunade, she said, bowing her head once to the older woman. Why are you here? And why do you wear the cloak of the Akatsuki? I am here on the behalf of Amigekyo. Our leader has sent me to observe the genin who have made it to the final exam, she explained. These men are my guards. So if there are any attacks on any one of them, I will consider it an attack on aim. Both Tsunade and Jiraiya tensed. Even though she didn't outright say it, they knew what she meant. She had essentially declared that aim was in the hands of the Akatsuki, giving them political power, and that she was here to watch Naruto. If she was here on behalf of AIM and the other members of Akatsuki were her guards, it meant they were under the protection of diplomatic immunity. If anyone tried to attack them right then and there, it would ignite a war between them and AIM. That was something the two of them did not need now. Very well, we welcome you to Konoha, Tsunade finally said. But know that if you or your guards attack anyone, we will treat as an attack as well. Do not worry, Lady Tsunade. We are only here to watch, nothing more. She started for the village proper. What happened to the other two, Conan? Jiraiya asked her. She stopped but didn't turn to face him. They died, a long time ago. She walked into the village and the other members followed her. The shinobi from other countries watched on as they walked down the road before hesitantly following them. This might complicate things, he sighed as they heard the shinobi behind them disperse. Only if they try something, Tsunade replied. Tsunade, the Akatsuki have taken control of AIM, you know what that means. I know. Not even the three of us were able to beat him, he reminded her. He could still remember that day with perfect clarity. How they survived was the clearest. I said I know, Jiraiya? She did know. It was an almost scary thought. Someone had been able to take control of AIM away from the same person who had given them the title of Sannin. Someone had killed Sansho no Hanzo, Hanzo of the Salamander. They had finished the free-for-all a little while back. Now they were working on evasion. It was Sokka's and Ikela's turn, as they dodged kunai and shuriken from Naruto and fire from Zuko. Had it been the beginning of the month, they might have been able to dodge the fire, but that would have been it. Now, he got the odd kunai or shuriken while the wolf dodges them completely. When is my turn going to be over? He asked as he ducked under a fireball. Less complaining, more evading, Naruto told him, throwing a kunai and a shuriken at the same time. They all heard Taunton oink behind them, but they didn't turn around. They heard someone come through the bushes. I'm back, Jiraiya announced. Did Taunton keep an eye on you guys? Yes, she did, Zuko replied. Were there any troubles? Well, there was this one part where Akela tried to attack her. She punched him so hard, I think her hand bruised, Naruto remarked, keeping a straight face. How can Taunton have a bruised hand? Jiraiya asked dryly. She's a pig. Alright then, you're the real fucking sadist, the blonde said, still keeping the straight face. He grimaced. Don't call me that. It's better than pervy sage. I agree with him, Zuko said. The same here, Sokka stated. Without warning, he grabbed his boomerang and threw it at Jiraiya. He quickly sidestepped, letting it fly past, and ducked to avoid a stream of fire from Zuko. When he stood up again, all three of them were coming at him with swords drawn. Zuko came in low, Sokka came up the middle, and Naruto swung high. He quickly pulled out two kunai and managed to block all three of them. You've taken the lessons to heart, he said with approval. You can go now, Taunton. I'll take it from here. Taunton nodded and walked into the bush. As she trotted away, she heard the sounds of metal clashing, Jiraiya shouting Ranjishigami no Jutsu, Wild Lion's main technique. And Naruto all but screaming, watch his hair! Watch his hair! Azula stood against the wall as the students walked into the schoolroom. What are you doing here? One of them asked her as they sat down in the seats. Azula is here because she requested something of me, Irika told the class. She is interested in learning more about the previous Hokages. That was partially true. She wanted to know about a specific Hokage, the blonde-haired one. It took her a bit, but she realized that was the same person she had seen in the swamp. How does that concern us, Irika-sensei? Another student asked. He smiled at them. You are the students. You're supposed to learn the information I tell you. Why don't you tell her about the Hokages? That got a chorus of groans from the students. If you like, we can make it a pop quiz. That silenced the groans. I thought not. We'll start with the Shodame Hokage. Who can tell me about him? One student stood up. His name was Hashirama Senju, she answered. What was he famous for? Well, he helped found the village. What else? He pressed her. He was also known for his use of mokuton, with style, another student said, standing up as the first sat back down. He was a woodbender. Azula repeated, trying to make sure she hadn't heard wrong. In a sense, yes, he was, Irika told her. He had been briefed about benders from Tsunade after the meeting she had with her. He turned his attention back to the student. Who succeeded him as the Nidame Hokage? His brother, Tobirama Senju, the student answered promptly. What was he famous for? He created the academy, the ANBU, the Chunin exams, and the Konoha military police force. Another student stood up. He was also a master of Suiton, water style, ninjutsu. He could create his own water out of the thin air or from himself. He could also perform complex techniques with a single hand seal, she said as the other sat down. Very good, and who succeeded him as Hokage? Irika asked her. When she didn't answer, another student stood up. He passed on the title of Hokage to his student, Hiruzen Sarutobi, in the midst of the First Shinobi World War. What was the Sandame Hokage famous for? He has fought in all 3 Shinobi World Wars and he trained the Sannin. Is that all? No. He also knew all the forms of shinobi combat and had complete mastery over them, which earned him the title of professor. He was also the holder of the monkey summoning contract. And who succeeded him? He was succeeded by Minato Namikaze but retook the position after the Yandame Hokage had died. This was where Azula really started paying attention. And how was the Yandame Hokage famous? Irika asked. The student sat down and another stood up. He was known throughout the shinobi world as Konoha no Kiroi Senko, Konoha's Yellow Flash, due to his use of the Hiraishin no Jutsu, Flying Thunder God technique. During the 3rd Shinobi World War, enemy had flee on-sight orders if they had ever encountered him. A third student stood up. He's also famous for defeating the Kyuubi 16 years ago. But he died afterwards and the 3rd Hokage had to step in again. When she heard that, Azula froze. She started to remember things she had heard or seen before, small things about Naruto that seemed inconsequential at the time. For a brief moment she would have sworn she had seen a head of a large fox snarling behind him. You know how I always think that Naruto has two auras? What did I do? Am I really a demon? Why do they keep hurting me? I am responsible for the hell he's been through. It sounded like he had woken up from a dream. Then he started to talk to himself. I didn't hear much, but I did hear the words Akatsuki, Jinchuriki, and Yambi. He's never told us about his past. I came to these lands so I could leave my past behind me. Like the fact you thought you were a demon when you were a child? There was an incident when I was born. As a result, the village lost its leader and many lives. Because I was born on the same day, they took it out on me. I'm sorry I kept things from you, Azula. But I didn't want you to know about them. I heal quickly. No one heals that quickly. I do. She sighed. This is one of your secrets, isn't it? He just nodded. You're going to have to tell me them someday. Maybe, but it's not today. All I had were my past experiences, and they're not something I like to remember. Does he not realize what the necklace is for? Geez, old man, can't you say we came to see their Jinchuriki in action? Azula, are you alright? What? She said, coming back to the rest of the world. Iruka looked at her with concern. I asked you if you were alright? Yes, I'm fine. She turned to the class. Thank you for all you said. She bowed shortly to them all. So, you learned everything you wanted to know? Yes. I have to leave now. Goodbye. She left the room before he could reply. She all but ran out of the academy and back onto the street. Naruto and I need to have a talk right now, she thought to herself. It was easier said than done. She didn't even know where he was. I saw Lord Jiraiya a few hours ago, she heard a woman nearby speak to her friends. He walked right past the hot springs and into the nearby woods. What's wrong with that? One of her friends asked. This is Lord Jiraiya, the man who peeps at women in the hot springs whenever they are in. I have never known him to just walk past the hot springs when there were women in it. It kinda makes me concerned. You mean didn't know? Another friend asked her. Know what? Lord Jiraiya is training Naruto Uzumaki and his teammates for the final Chunin exam. They've been living in the forest near the hot springs for a month. Well, isn't that helpful? Azula thought to herself as she made her way to the hot springs. Jiraiya had them stand in the water and practice the forms over and over. They had done this countless times during the month, so they had gotten used to it. They had also gotten used to the fact that Jiraiya would randomly strike at them, seeing if their concentration would break. He walked in front of them, watching them carefully. Without warning, he threw a punch at Sokka. He deflected the punch and kept going through the forms, like nothing had happened. Better, Jiraiya simply stated. He kicked Zuko, who blocked it and kept on moving through the form. Without saying anything, he pulled out a kunai and swung it at Naruto. He disarmed him, tossed the kunai away and kept doing the forms. He kept on randomly attacking them for the next half hour. Every time, they would block, deflect or disarm him. They'd done it so many times during the month, it had become a reflex. Alright, that's enough. You guys can stop. They relaxed their bodies but kept their minds on alert. It wouldn't have been the first time Jiraiya would tell them to stop, only to suddenly attack them. That was what alerted them. Hit the ground! Zuko cried out. They all ducked as a large fireball sailed over their heads and hit a nearby tree, setting it ablaze. Did anyone else notice that fireball was blue? Sokka asked. For some reason, he had a feeling something dangerous was coming towards them. Trust me, I saw it too, Naruto told him. And I only know one person who can do that. They all looked up and saw Azula standing at the edge of the training ground with a very angry expression on her face. When she looked at Naruto, she snarled and threw another fireball at him. He leapt back into the surrounding bush to dodge. They could all hear the footsteps getting fainter. She growled and went after him. Should we go after them? Sokka asked. Not when Azula is like that, Zuko told him. He had been on the receiving end of that attitude to know better now. Naruto had managed to distance himself away from the training ground with Azula on his heels. They finally stopped in a small clearing. Azula, what's the matter with you? He asked as they circled one another. Why didn't you tell me? She asked, bending another fireball at him. Tell you what? He dodged it and still kept his distance. She bent a stream of fire at him. What, did you think it was something only you needed to know about? You're not making any sense, he told her as he rolled out of the way of the stream. Stop lying. I know everything. She bent a barrage of fireballs at him. He ducked low and moved forward. Reaching out and grabbing her wrists, he yanked them downward, stopping the barrage. What are you talking about, Azula? I'm talking about the fact that you have a demon sealed inside you and you never bothered to tell us, she shouted. The clearing fell quiet as the shout echoed in the trees. How do you find out? He finally asked, his voice turning quiet. I didn't put it together until today. I had asked Irika about the previous Hokages. He, in turn, asked the class and they told me. When they got to the Yondaime defeating the Kyuubi, things started to make sense. What do you mean? The details came out in a cold, precise manner, but with heat underneath the words. You told me that there was an incident on the day you were born and people blamed you for it. When you were a child, you wondered if you were a demon, so that must have meant people thought you were one. You left this land behind to escape your past, which means that your experiences with this place had become too much, and you wanted to go somewhere people didn't know who you were. I also know that you talk to yourself when you think you're alone and somehow, the words Yambi and Jinchuriki mean something to you. But the Yambi, which sounds similar to Kyuubi, was not the one to attack Konoha, so that must mean you are not the only one. He was silent for a minute before letting out a defeated sigh. You always did have a keen eye, he said, praising her. On the day of my birth, the Kyuubi attacked the village. The Yondaime Hokage sealed it inside of me to save the village and sacrificed himself in the process. A Jinchuriki is someone who holds a Biju inside of them. I am the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. Why didn't you tell me or the others? She demanded once he had stopped. What was I supposed to say? He asked back. That I had a fox seal inside my stomach that had the ability to destroy the Fire Nation if he felt like it? That there was a chance that he could take control of my body and go on a rampage. Hey, we have an agreement, the Kyuubi protested. I don't take over your body unless you're unconscious and we're in the middle of a fight. And since that never really happened anymore, he didn't take control. She doesn't know that, Kyuubi. I'm using it as an example, his Jinchuriki silently replied. Did you think that we would treat you differently if you did tell us? Azula demanded, yanking her hands out of his grip. Yes. That's why I left in the first place, he answered, raising his voice to match hers. Everyone kept looking at me with hate, disgust or fear in the first 12 years of my life. I didn't know why. I couldn't make any friends because parents kept telling their kids to stay away from me. I was beaten on a regular basis, and I couldn't even go to a hospital to get treated. They would just throw me out. Do you think I would want to go through that again in a new land after I had just left it behind? It would have been different. How would you know that? The reaction would have been the same. If I had told you, odds were that you would have wanted nothing to me. You'd just look at me like I was a freak. So yes, I didn't tell you about what I held. But can you blame me? The forest all around them echoed with the silence that followed. I know you wanted to keep this a secret, she finally said. But I'm also hurt that you didn't think I would be able to see you as human and not a demon. If you can't trust me, how can I trust you? What are you talking about, Azula? You are not my bodyguard anymore. If I can't have your trust, you will not defend me, she declared in an authoritative voice. Never once had he expected to hear those words come from her mouth. What? You can't mean that. I've been protecting you for 3 years. And you've been keeping secrets from me. I've been tolerant of that, but I can't take it anymore. Until we can trust each other, we're done. He looked like he had been slapped, having understood what she meant by done. Azula. Naruto, please just don't. She turned her back on him. Let's just leave each other alone for now, okay? She didn't wait for an answer. She walked into the bushes and away from him. He stood there, listening to her footsteps getting fainter. You okay? The Kyuubi finally dared to ask. I've just been effectively dumped over you, Kyuubi. Do you think I feel okay? He asked back, still sounding like he couldn't believe it. Would me saying sorry make you feel better? Not really, no. I figured as much. It had been 2 days since the kages and the daimyos had arrived. It was the day of the final exam, and the arena was packed. People had literally fought in the streets over tickets leading to the day. Some, mostly shinobi, had been smart enough to get a ticket a month beforehand. Hey, there are some seats over there. Kiba declared as the other members of the Konoha 11 in Konoha, and the Team Avatar walked into the stands. There was indeed an empty row of seats, which looked like it could seat everyone. They all sat down, proving the assumption true. Up in the kage box, all 5 of the kages had been seated and waited the beginning of the exam. This will be a very interesting day, Mei remarked. She could already see that the stands were packed. If anything, at least we'll be able to see a couple of good fights, be wrapped. Seeing people get beat down will make us feel alright. Knock it off, they told him. Where are Conan and her guards? Tsunade asked Jiraiya in a whisper. The Toad Sage stood behind her chair, like a guard keeping watch. They have a private booth and are being constantly monitored, he quietly answered. She nodded in acknowledgement and looked down at the field. She saw 5 people waiting behind the proctor for the beginning of the exam. Meanwhile, others were doing the same thing. Why is Sokka wearing a cloak and hood? Aang wondered aloud. Sokka was indeed wearing a dark cloak with the hood drawn over his head. They could because he was talking animatedly with Zuko, and because Akela sat on his haunches by his side. I guess we'll find out, Suki replied. Have you noticed? Tenten quietly asked Shikamaru. Yeah, I did, he replied. It's a drag. What are members of the ANBU doing here? Kiba asked the others as he looked and noted the location of each ANBU member. Akamaru was too big to come with him now, so he stayed home. Perhaps for extra security? Suggested Niji. All 5 of the kages are here. But the last time ANBU was posted as security during the final exam, we got invaded, Ino pointed out. Something's going to happen, Tenten said. We'll have to be ready. Everyone agreed, everyone, except Hinata. What is the matter, Hinata? Shino asked her. Something is not right, she said as she kept looking around the field, obviously trying to find something. There are ANBU stationed all around the arena, Choji pointed out. I don't mean that. Look down at the field. They did so and immediately saw what she meant. Hey guys, we're not the only ones who are seeing this, right? Katara asked the rest of them. Trust me, Katara, we're seeing it too, Kiba assured her. As a matter of fact, everyone in the arena noticed it too. Down in the field, standing behind the proctor, were Zuko, Sokka, Su-Jetsu, Karen and Yugo. There were only 5 people there. Soon, everyone in the arena, including the kages and the delegation from AIM, with the exception of 3 people, all had the same question. Where is Naruto Uzumaki?